I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. This meeting is being recorded by City Council and GCTV 9. If any other persons present are doing the same, please notify me at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on to a roll call vote.
Councillor Golub?
Here.
Councillor Gordon?
Here.
Councillor Mastrotaro?
Here.
Councillor Bullock?
Here.
Vice President Gilmore?
Here.
Councillor Perry?
Here.
Councillor Wondolowski?
Here.
Councillor Healy is not here. Councillor Garrett?
Here. Here? Did that actually pick up? No. Hello, hello. Okay.
Councillor Minhas is not present. Councillor Toronzo?
Here.
President Bonley?
Here,
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
and I'd like to announce the members, just so everybody knows, the councilors attending remotely are Councillor Perry, Golub, Gordon, and Vice President Gilmore. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, which is voluntary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Councillor Minhas has joined the meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of August 21st?
So moved.
And a second, Master Totaro. Any discussion? All those in favor, oops, nope, sorry, roll call vote.
Councillor Golub?
Yes.
Councillor Gordon?
Yes.
Councillor Mastrotaro?
Yes.
Councillor Bullock?
Yes.
Vice President Gilmore?
Yes.
Councillor Perry?
Yes.
Councillor Wondolowski?
Yes.
Councillor Garrett?
Yes.
Councillor Minhas?
Yes.
Councillor Toronzo?
Yep.
Mr. President, do you wish to vote?
Yes and yes.
The motion passes.
Next, we'll move on to communications from Superintendent Patnode and Chair Johnson Masad. Welcome.
What's wrong with this country? What's wrong with this country? What's wrong with it is too many people from other countries screw it up. Detective Sidwitz here is one of the few Native American people.
Very quickly, could the host of the meeting, oh, never mind, that person muted.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us once again to come and talk to you. I asked to have on your agenda the school committee city council relationship because I think it's kind of clear that we need a bit of a reset there. I'd like to start just by owning that I have responded a little bit defensively and protectively in response to some of the requests for information that were made to the superintendent. It wasn't intentionally meant to insult anybody, but I do feel extremely protective of our superintendent and what she's trying to do. So I thought it might be useful for me to share a little bit about my perspective of of how I see that the city council and the school committee should be working together, or ideally would be. I think we would share a mutual goal of respectfully working with each other to improve student outcomes while effectively and responsively managing the hard-earned tax dollars of Greenfield residents. And I think that's a vision that we all share. So, if that is our goal, I think it's useful to kind of start from looking at where we are, and then, and then figuring out how we want to get from point A to point B. And part of that, I think, is just, for myself, I looked at our charter for the way that charter lays out our responsibilities and what our relationship with each other should be. And so I know that you all may know this stuff, and it may be a review, but I think it's useful sometimes to kind of go back to those core principles. And I'd like to lay out for you what I think I learned restudying that. But certainly if I am, you think I'm incorrect, please, I welcome your corrections. But first I'll say I really want to acknowledge that you as the city council do have the responsibility to look at the city budget and to set the amount that the Greenfield Public Schools has to work with each year, and you have an oversight role. You can ask for information from us. But it's, I guess one thing I would like to say is that it seems that in some ways the charter does see the schools as a different animal from the rest of the city budget, that we operate in with very different goals than many of the rest of the city's departments. We operate within a regulatory environment that's very complex. There's a very deep level of knowledge needed to develop a school budget and to hire a superintendent, to evaluate a superintendent, to set a strategic plan. All of those things are our responsibility as the school committee. There is a bit of a dance there because we have our own budget subcommittee. That budget subcommittee works with the superintendent on developing the superintendent's budget. That budget then goes to the mayor. The mayor then puts forward to you all her proposal of what, how much the schools should be allocated. You all then get to decide on the overall number that comes to us. Certainly you should have all the information that you need in order to make that determination. So I guess I had some questions for you all, I guess, thinking about all this, which is, on the school committee, I've asked members not to request large reports of information from the superintendent because there are 7 of us. And if any one of us can at any time kind of ask, send an email that requires a half day's work from the superintendent in order to provide that to us. And if that information is not actually relevant to a decision that we've decided to make as a body, in other words, if we haven't voted together, we're taking on this strategic issue and we need this report from the superintendent that will take time for her to compile. I've asked them please not to make those requests. I've directed the superintendent, if school committee members ask you questions that are easy to answer, feel free to share that information. But even within our own committee, I've asked the superintendent and I've asked our members not to make those requests without a school committee vote, like that this is a project we're taking on and we need this information to make a vote. So I think that all of that is kind of part of why I've responded a bit defensively to the request for information. I'm not sure what your guidelines are as a city council, whether there are a lot of you. Is it your perspective that any one of you at any time can write to the superintendent and request thorough information about any program area that you're interested in? That doesn't seem right to me. I'd be curious to hear a response to that. And I wish that President Bottomley, I wish rather than sending you a long email with that question, I wish I just picked up the phone and called you, because I think that is the kind of person I want to be and the kind of relationship I want to have with you. So that's one question that I think that would be really helpful for us to get an answer to, because to me it seems that if the city council's role with the school committee budget is to set that number for us, wouldn't that happen during the course of budget deliberations after we've already put forward a budget? And you know, I guess one way it's occurred to me is I know there's some interest in the transportation program. Say, you know, the superintendent provides all the information that you want, and the superintendent advocated to me that she be, you know, that she provides some information to you know about the transportation program. But say we gave you all the information you wanted, and in the end you disagreed. You thought that, you know, the transportation program could be run with $50,000 less. Then the power that you have as a city council would be, at the end of the budget process, would be to, I guess, give us $50,000 less overall in our school budget. But then the budget comes back to the school committee, and we're actually the ones who vote on the final allocation of those dollars that you give to us. So you don't actually have that much control. I guess it could send a message, I guess, like you'd be saying, we disapprove so strongly of your opinion of how the transportation program should be run that we're going to cut the Greenfield schools budget. But then if the superintendent and the school committee determine that those dollars, are all the dollars that are in that budget, are really required in order to meet the requirements for our students. There's a lot of requirements around transportation for special needs students. Obviously, we have to get every student who's going to the Greenfield Public Schools to school every day. My own perspective is there probably isn't a ton of wiggle room about how that's all implemented. It's probably a lot of it is kind of mandated just by the expectations of the law. But so we would then be in a position of having to figure out what to do with $50,000 less. So, and that would really be our determination. So I guess that's the question too. I'm still a little bit confused. I'm glad that the superintendent was willing and interested in providing you more information tonight about the transportation, but I just don't understand how it relates to a decision that you're making and how you all determine which of you and when are allowed to request information from the superintendent, or I don't know how you do it for other departments in the city either. So I'm very curious to learn about that.
I definitely can answer some of those.
Thank you,
if you
please.
want.
Yeah.
We don't stop any counselors from asking any questions. So, I mean, first of all, our primary job is probably to ask questions. They're oftentimes inconvenient, annoying. They sometimes can take up a lot of time. But the basic process is a counselor could write to the clerk, because that is how we keep it all straight. And so we don't have multiple repeat requests. Goes to the clerk. That would also be CC'd to the council president, the vice president, and then it goes to committee chairs. So just because someone's asking a question doesn't mean it's guaranteed to go on a committee meeting. So committee chairs would then decide as a group if something should be discussed. And hopefully there would be conversations that would go on. In other words, like the transportation is rather large, that the request could be considered a larger request, would not be like, we need this tomorrow. So that would say that's where the phone conversation would come in and say, several members have wanted to do this. The chair of, let's say it went to Ways and Means, wants to look into this. We understand that it's the beginning of the school year. It could take some time and have a discussion about that. That's our basic process. And I wanted to clarify, this always reminds me of Councilor Toronzo, who has to say every budget season that we do not control line items for any department. And my line is, we don't run anything. We don't run any department. We don't control any line item. But we do ask questions about them, and that includes the schools. And I think it's just it's really important that we get information, and I don't think we want to jump right to the step that people might be unhappy and therefore cut the school budget. Because I'm not sure that's a logical jump. If someone was unhappy with a particular decision, or even if we're talking about transportation, if someone was unhappy, my guess is that we'd have the meeting, you look into it, and then it's up to the school committee, the superintendent. But it's mostly a question of, I think when people want information, I think if it's, and the question is if it's reasonable and how big it is and what kind of information. But I think in general, we should talk about it and people should have access to information.
And I guess I have a couple, well, one thing is just to say, I'm not sure every counselor is with you in terms of that concept of not reducing the budget. I just feel like I have heard that rhetoric from certain members. Obviously, I don't know what the body as a whole thinks, because we wouldn't know that until you all voted on the budget at the end of the year. But I would say there isn't a necessarily unanimity on that perspective. The other thing is, I feel like maybe I missed the part where the committee chairs voted to put the school transportation onto a Ways and Means agenda. So did that happen and I missed it? I don't remember.
I believe I put it on the agenda and then we held off because there was no communication between us. So I didn't feel like, it seemed there needed to be more communication to figure out a way forward. So it was put on the committee chairs to talk about, but it was not put on Ways and Means to discuss.
So I guess I'd say if the committee chairs want to have a meeting to discuss whether to add the transportation budget to the Ways and Means agenda, we would welcome an invitation to that meeting to discuss it and to learn about what it is that you want and why it's going on that agenda. But, I guess, from reading in the recorder, both the letter that I emailed to you and other people's comments, it sounds like I'm not really sure exactly what we were supposed to do, because you hadn't put it on a Ways and Means agenda, and we just got an email from a member of that committee, not even from the chair, asking for detailed information. So I guess that's the part where I feel like the council might have missed a step, because I personally, as a school committee, wouldn't be eager for my members to be out requesting information even from the superintendent without a vote of the committee about that we're putting it on an agenda and there's something we're deliberating about. So I guess in terms of wanting to be good partners with you and be cooperative with each other, I feel like maybe the first message from the city council shouldn't be just an email with a request for information that actually takes a substantial amount of resources to answer.
To be frank, though, that's what we do.
Well, that's what you as a
We
body
we
do.
email questions to departments. That's our job.
You as a
That's it.
body, you as a body, or you as individuals?
Both.
So you're really saying that every single city councilor here could be, take 5 minutes and send an email requesting 4 or 8 hours of time to answer?
Yes, or even worse, trust me. The point is, then there needs to be communication after that step would be helpful. It's a phone call. That's where you can sort through some of this, how much, what kind of information, and that could also be discussed at committee chairs before it goes. So it's not like you have to immediately, a counselor calls you and you jump and you have to put everything down and answer that counselor's question. That's not how it works. But we do have it, that's why we also, in theory, are trying to go back, and Councilor Gilmore can probably confirm this too, we try to go through the clerk, because that streamlines all of our questions. Again, so say you don't have, something volatile comes up and you have 7 city councilors email you a similar question. That's a waste of time. So that's why the communication through the clerk really helps that process. And then you can call me and say, this is crazy, or whatever it is. And hopefully we can find some sort of middle ground. The problem is when you get absolutely no information, at least my experience here in Greenfield in 5 years is it doesn't work too well. But I don't want to speak all, if other counselors would like to open up this up to questions, or do you have more statements? There's like a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, I would welcome the dialogue, but I guess before we start that, I will say that I don't think that the school department and the school committee have always been treated with the appropriate amount of civility, just to be frank, that we should have a right to expect here. And sometimes I haven't known what exactly our recourse is in those situations. Like, I know you all have a code of civility that you follow and that you can call, some type of, or you should be following. But you at least have, with Robert's Rules of Orders, you have, an expectation of treating each other with respect. And I know that people could call points of order, probably about certain things. I don't know what, I just feel like if we're looking structurally at like how to have this good working relationship that we would like to have with you, it seems like us being equal partners and getting to speak up and say, President Bottomley, can you help out here? Because this doesn't seem like the tone that the city council should be having towards us. Is that an acceptable request?
Yes, and again, it gets into this idea of control, because I don't control any of the people sitting here who are elected by people in our precincts or at large by the city, and I can try to manage this, and I have my manner of dealing with it has been to talk to people individually. If there's been issues have come up, I talk to people, and I hope people hear that and listen. Otherwise, I've also warned counselors at the last committee chair that I will interrupt and warn people if it's getting a little out of hand, maybe say rein it in, or just to try to stop things from getting, it gets very heated. It's definitely not always a very comfortable place here.
Yeah, and I didn't sign up for this job because I was looking for comfort, but I guess civility and working together, and I guess what I really hope will not happen is something that's happened several times after coming to this meeting or hearing reports of counselors coming up to us after the fact and saying that was really wrong, I shouldn't have let that go on. So I feel like there's some civility that's the responsibility of individuals to treat us with respect, but also people who are bystanders need to learn how to speak up, and so I appreciate your commitment to doing that, President Bottomley. Thank you.
Thanks. Some questions. I saw Master Tataro.
Thank you. I just want to go through the steps that took place. Before last month's city council meeting, I wrote the superintendent through the clerk's office a very respectful email asking for information regarding the special ed transportation. You got back to me and said, could you be more specific? more specific questions. And I said, yeah, we'll put this off till September. And I sent you a few specific questions. And the response was not from you, it was from your chair of the committee, and it wasn't even addressed to me, it was addressed to Mr. Bottomley. And basically saying it was none of our business. So that snowballed. And I think I didn't copy him on that email. That email was through the clerk's office to you, the superintendent. He responded. So unfortunately, the way his response was written set off some emotions, not only with me, but several counselors. So that's how that developed.
I'd like to respond.
Yes.
So I was copied on the email, I think, when the city clerk put it out. I was copied on it then. So it wasn't that the superintendent got that and then kind of secretly forwarded it to me. And that's why the nature of my email was the questions that I'm getting a chance to ask tonight. I guess I didn't get an orientation to the way that the city council operates. And so, and I will reiterate my apology. It's true. I should have I think the question really was for President Bottomley, because that's what I'm trying to understand is, it seems unusual to me that any one of you at any time can write such, but maybe that is true, that you have that power. I didn't see that in my review of the charter, but so I just want to say that was my call, that the email was copied to me from the city clerk, and I told the superintendent I would be responding, so it's not that she was being protective or hiding, but I was pushing back and trying to protect her, and I should have just called President Bottomley.
Councilor Minhas?
So first off, thank you for coming in front of us, and we don't want to grill you, that's not the point. But you have to understand that our primary job is to represent the public. We don't agree with each other many of the times. We have heated discussions, and if heated exchanges are your concern, I'm sorry, I don't know if that will ever go away at the city council. I would love there to be, sweet and nice and smiles everywhere, but I think even later on in this meeting we won't have that. The point being, our primary job is to ask questions from different department heads and from department officials, whether that be the police department, the DPW, the school. Part of their job when they decide that they want to take on that role is to be answerable to the public. One of the main ways to be answerable to the public is to come in front of this body, which we all have different opinions and we all have different styles and different personalities, but part of that job is to come in front of us and present yourself and your department in specific as to how you are spending the people's money. That is our job. We can't stop doing that. We can try to be more civil while doing that. Glenn, you had asked President Bottomley what the specific procedure was to ask a question. I think the preferred procedure is to go through the clerk's office, but also the whole point of any department head coming in front of here. I mean, we've had Marlo come here and he sat there for hours. And those questions were not on the agenda. Those questions were not on, given in a specific script. These are just off-the-cuff questions because there might be, 5 minutes ago, a constituent might have called us and been like, hey, you're on the council, you're my representative. this is what I want the answer to. So our job is to relay those questions on. So we want a working relationship. We want the schools to succeed. We thank you guys for putting in the work. You guys get grilled by us. We get grilled by the public. We get grilled by the paper, different constituents. So the job isn't easy, and I thank you guys for putting yourself up to it. But our job is to answer questions, and we'll continue doing that. So thank you.
May I respond, President Bottomley?
Yes, yep.
I guess just to go back, I am not here because I want to be comfortable or I need everything to be easy. I ran for school committee, for gosh sakes, so that's not something you do if you want to avoid that. It's respect. It's respect that we want, and that's what we're asking for, and civility, and a collaborative approach. And I think that we will all get farther in being effective stewards of the hard-earned dollars of Greenfield taxpayers, as well as better student outcomes if we do that. The other thing that I would like to ask you, Councilor Minhas, is how do you see the relationship between the school committee and the city council? Because in that case, we have a budget subcommittee. We have a committee that's whole job is oversight of the superintendent and of the school budget. So is this a special case where, I mean, didn't the people who did the charter kind of trust us as the elected officials also, like you, elected by the people of Greenfield to do that job? Isn't that primarily the school committee's function?
So again, like I think another counselor was saying, we don't decide line items. We don't decide where you spend your money. You have the power to do that. You do that. Now, questions about those line items, we definitely have the power to ask you. Do we have the power to just wipe away 50,000 for, I don't know, God knows what? No, we don't have the power to do that. But do we have the right to ask you about it? Absolutely. Now, I don't know if President Bottomley is going to shut me down for this, but I don't think that going through a specific email or a telephone call prior to a city council meeting is preferred. I don't think it's legally mandated. We can have an open exchange, an exchange based on respect, but our primary job is to represent people. We are bombarded with emails and telephone calls, and as we're walking up and down the streets, that randomly people will just be like, hey, you need to answer about this, you need to answer about that. And that's what we have to relay on to city officials. We are fortunate enough to be elected into this position, but that's the relationship between bureaucracy and elected officials. And so I don't think it's overkill to have multiple layers of transparency and accountability. I think that's the beauty of democracy. Democracy is very complicated, and it takes a lot of time, and it can be messy, but that's the whole point, is to have a checks and balances.
Councilor Toronzo, then Garrett and Gilmore.
Hello, thanks for coming in. I know I've been kind of at the spirit of a little bit of this, and I'm sure that some of the civility comments are about my statements last month when I was more than irritated at some information that was newly available, which I've expressed was unacceptable. It was dealt with, kind of, for the time being, which is great, and personally I think should be used as a learning curve for future, which was why I was bringing that up. To comment to some of the approaches brought tonight, is our mission statement as a Ways and Means Committee is listed as, we deal with all matters pertaining to expenditures, the city budget, tax classification, and other financial issues. That includes the entirety of the school budget. And as I've said for the 3 years that I've been here, all of them on Ways and Means as well, is I try to reiterate this all the time at the subcommittee level, at the full committee. I try to relate to the public as best I can. We can't do anything with the line items. We can only suggest if something seems to be awry, like, and I get it, you guys have a budget committee as well, which is great. I wish it wasn't just beholden upon like the director of a department to be essentially the budget committee for their own department. But we're not scrutinizing what you guys are doing any more than any other department. We've asked police to come in and give explanations midway through the year. It's not just during budget season. We've done it with fire department, we've done it with DPW, any number of departments. But when we solicit information, I've never received the stonewall that we've gotten. And that's the problem we've had. So I understand that you're asking for respect because maybe my tone was a little bit off last month, which I didn't even really think was that bad. Trust me, it definitely was not bad. That was really was really reined in. But if we're talking about respect, respect comes in the email form too. Respect comes in the action that is taken. And if blowing us off and telling us it's none of our business is the reaction, that's super disrespectful to us as mutually elected officials. It is our job one of our main focuses, as has been said, is to scrutinize departments, is to ask questions, is to represent our constituents, to ask these questions for us. And we do have FOIA. I don't want you guys to have to, 10 days I think you get for FOIA requests? Any member of the public can request any information from your department, and you are expected by law to respond to that within 10 days. We're trying to do this in a way where we present questions, give you an ample amount of time to do it, but then if there's no response or the response is go pound sand, that's not an appropriate response at all. And we could do this all through things that would really occupy the time, and we don't want to do that either, because FOIA you have to do. And also to state, it's not just, I understand your position of wanting to understand why any of us can ask a question at any time. It's also because we're citizens of the city. Any citizen sitting in this room, watching anywhere out there, 18,000 people, should be able to ask a question of the operations or the workings, financial, anything that's public record, which is everything that you're doing. They should be able to get an answer to some degree. And as I said, no one's asking anyone to jump through hoops and get this tomorrow. And it's very understandable if there's a more in-depth response needed, that would take some time, and that's fine. We're just asking for a response. And there are some times where we have asked questions earlier before the budget was set. The same question that Councilor Master-Sotero asked in regards to the transportation, that was asked in April. And some information was given, but it wasn't explained. So now there's follow-up on it. And this is now 5 months later. There's follow-up on it. And I will say, from being involved in 3 cycles of budget with the schools, for the most part, it's been fine. I will also just mention that in those discussions, there are a lot of times where we hear from the company that's hired to help, we hear it's complex. It's complex. You couldn't possibly understand it. It's complex. And that's really insulting. So if we want to talk about respect, it's really insulting. And I think that should be addressed, just my suggestion, maybe addressed with the firm you guys hire to do the budget. Because guess what? We're not idiots. Like, some people are better at finance than others, and some people might be better than the people who are working in the department that's being hired. So I think it's really insulting for somebody to be saying that just because they don't want to have to explain themselves to the budget committee that oversees it. And it's when I kind of hear you beating around the bush about something that I've said before, I'm not wanting to cut. I'm not wanting to suggest that anybody cuts the budget out of spite or anything like that. But it is, the reason I mentioned the way that I did, whether it was at chairs or previously, like, if a department doesn't want to play nice, why would they, and answer the questions that are being asked, why would the expectation be to just be like, oh, well, they didn't answer it, so I guess we just give them all of it? When people are concerned about that, they're concerned about their taxes, they're concerned about the budgets that happen. We want to make sure that there's transparent information. We've had a history of that in this city, of there not being great transparency. So we're pushing that same issue, and it goes across all departments. And I guess the last thing that I would hope that maybe you could clear the air on tonight is in some of the responses, whether it be in the newspaper or email responses that have gone out to constituents that have asked, that I've seen the responses to, it's been said that the reason, essentially the reason for the, let's just call it a staffing debacle at the beginning of the year, is because we didn't fully fund the school's request. Now, I want to make it very clear. We funded the entirety of the school's request minus 400 and something change, I forget the exact number at this point, that the mayor cut off the initial request. And at the April 23rd Ways and Means Committee meeting, I went back and found the clip because I was like, I know I'm not crazy. The question was asked, I believe by Councilor Mastrotero, your budget was cut, 400 grand. What's that gonna mean? I think the words were care to share. It's probably a phrase you use often, right? And what was shared at that meeting was that there was over $200,000, over half of what was cut, was going to be covered by a billing error with Cosmuscus from the year prior. And the other half was going to be covered by revolving accounts that involve SPED that were never really used. That was the quote, I think. We never really used this, so we can take care of the rest. That to me says, cool, we didn't have to go back and try to find other monies in the city because it was fully funded. The year prior, we dug deep, if you remember, to be able to fund the schools because there was such a cut. When we get word, the report is, nope, cool, we're good. And then so we make our judgment, we pass the budget the way that it was with the $400,000 cut. And then 5 months later, it's being thrown back in our faces like as if the mayor or the school or the city council somehow didn't fund it. And that's the reason that some things are having issues. That's legit. That's just not true. And so I think it's important to make sure that those statements are actually factual. And I think that that's a different form of respect as well. So I just want to say it, but I honestly, I look forward to trying to work better. I hope that this becomes a more amicable, communication, and that we don't have to be having like almost essentially like infighting within our own city departments. Those are just some things that I want to point out that it does, and from other folks that I've talked to in the last month and a half about this, with their concerns of it, are similar. It's almost like why can't you guys get along, right? Like, why is it so hard to get information? Like, it shouldn't be hard to get information because, like I said, any member of the general public should be able to request the information that they need because they're also going to be making informed decisions come elections for any of us, yourself, like any of those. So there's a reason that people want to know information. And I think that those requests could just be handled in a better way. And like you said, with a conversation or a response that's within like, hey, look, we're probably not going to get this to you this week, but we'll, put it on the list and try to get it to you as soon as we can is a much more, respectful approach to a request for information.
Chair, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, well, I'd like to apologize again for getting defensive and protective. And I should have just picked up the phone and called President Bottomley. I also want to say for any member of the public who's listening, we fully welcome your FOIA requests. We agree that any member of the public has a right to request information following the process. And we're always happy to comply with those requests. I think it's there's a bit of a culture. I mean, I don't know. We're both new in our jobs. I came on in January. The superintendent just started. I'm very interested in the way that you in what I've learned tonight. That in a way you don't just function as a body that takes votes on what investigations to pursue and which ones not to, but that you each, the way your norms are that each of you see yourselves as an independent investigator almost, and certainly there's a process where the clerk can kind of clear up any repetitive requests and so on. But that's very interesting to me. I'm surprised personally as a resident in Greenfield to learn that the council doesn't vote on important choices that are made about what information to pursue and what information not to pursue. Because I think that it certainly has, I know that there have been concerns at the city council about the amount of funding that we allocate for administration. I think that's because the schools are a different animal and operate in a regulatory environment that requires a ton of administration. But certainly needing to be ready to answer any question at any time from any city councilor requires administrative resource. And I imagine it also absorbs resource from other departments that are also pursuing their own strategic plans. So I would encourage the city council to consider that if that's really the way you want to operate.
I just wanted to respond quickly to that. We do vote on leadership, so not every councilor gets to set their own agenda for the whole city council. The council votes on its leadership, which is what the committee chairs is, and those chairs determine the agendas for what happens to those questions, for the most part.
Not in the case that we're discussing tonight.
I want to let other councilors speak first, but the reason that didn't happen is because I didn't push it, because we're getting to the point that I would have had to do a FOIA request because we were refused all information and communication. That's why that stopped. I wanted to put it on it. I could have done it and just said, we're going to go FOIA. I could have advised the clerk, that's the way we're going to. So that's why that process didn't happen, is because I removed it from the committee chair's agenda and said, give me time. That's what I said to the committee chair, give me time to talk and make this happen in a better way, because it looked like it was going poorly.
I mean,
And part of that, I will take some responsibility too. I don't want this to be like, you guys are in the hot seat right now. So
Yeah.
believe me, I can do better too.
Well, let's talk more later. I mean, the superintendent did compile the information, so it's not worth maybe rehashing everything, but I still have some follow-up questions for you, President Bottomley. I'm still a little fuzzy on some of the things that happened.
We do have a bunch of counselors, and I'll advise them our normal procedure is to have 5 minutes to respond to a particular. I'm hoping we can keep it concise, but we have 4 more counselors currently in the queue, so hopefully we can go through that. Counselor Garrett?
I will do my best to not take up 5 minutes. So just one thing that I wanted to respond to when you mentioned administration. I'm a public school teacher, and I work in a district that had been forced basically to pass an override to keep the school from having to cut staff. And one of the choices we made, the school committee there made, was to combine superintendent and principal for our high school. Very different district than Greenfield, much smaller, it's Hatfield. And so that was a way that we saved $100,000, which is like 2 teachers' salaries. So just, I understand the complexity of the regulatory environment that schools are in. We have IEPs, we have 504s, all that. The only thing I wanted to just kind of agree with the other counselors and what they've been talking about with information. It helps us help you if people don't have a black box to look in. And so if you think about like a metaphor, like there could be a monster under the bed if you never shine a flashlight underneath it. Right now, that monster under the bed that could be there or could not be there, if we can't see inside that, under the bed, is fiscal irresponsibility, right? And so I really like the idea of having the budget subcommittee talk to the Ways and Means Committee so we can have discussions well before we get to budget season next spring. But again, sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? You've heard that one too. Mm-hmm. And so the more information you can give us, the easier it is to make the argument on this side of the bar that everything is, I's have been dotted, T's have been crossed, the whole thing. So I appreciate you guys coming and sharing this information with us, and again, looking forward to working together. Thanks.
Thank you.
Counselor Gilmore?
Yeah, I think a lot of counselors have addressed some of what I was going to say, so I can keep this short. But I did want to sort of double down on the idea that city councilors are independent. Like elect leadership. We, the president with, the advice of, the vice president to some degree, selects committee chairs based on who seems to be, available for the extra responsibility, because it does take extra time, who has a talent or a knack for a particular issue. But their primary function is to just kind of keep the meeting running, make sure that they're facilitating the meeting. In no way does the city council operate as like a single monolithic voting block. So President Bottomley and myself, like, we would never call a counselor and tell them, like, you need to fall in line. That's not how a representational democracy is supposed to work. I mean, we'll call and have conversations and say, maybe you could have handled that a little better. We do have some people who are very passionate and rough around the edges, but they're representative of our community. We have people who live in Greenfield who are rough around the edges, and we want to have that representation. And we ask that people, tone it down sometimes. But I think it would be dangerous to suggest that President Bottomley would try to silence our members by telling them that they're not allowed to ask a department head questions because the city council hasn't voted on it yet. Because I don't feel like, that works in a spirit of, democracy or transparency. I mean, I think our town is, leans very far to the left for the most part, but we do have conservative folks who still need to be represented. And if we did this by majority rule and the minority never gets to speak at all, there's no representation there. I think it would be dangerous to suggest that. And, President Bottomley, I know you only got a few more months left on your term here, but please don't tell our members when they're allowed to speak to department heads.
Counselor Wondolowski?
Thank you. And thank you for your apology. It takes a lot to come in front of us, so I appreciate that. It's not our intention to play gotcha with you guys. I know Councilor Mastrotoro, part of sending the email and having individuals so that you weren't caught off guard here in front of everybody without having all the numbers and stuff. So we also want to be fair, and I think that's really important to not throw you under the buses that we're talking about. I'm on Ways and Means, and we take it really seriously, and we did fully fund the budget, and we talked about what you said, Glenn, about not having the line item authority. So if we cut the school budget, we didn't want somebody to cut teachers, right? Because that could be a choice that you would do even if we said, well, we didn't like X, right? So we take that really seriously, and I know one of the reasons I'm on council was helping to get money for the schools the previous year when it was cut. It's something that's really important. You also mentioned administrative overhead. We're hearing that from constituents, and so we have to ask those questions. And if we understand better why it's important, then we can vote better. So that's our job, and I appreciate you coming in and trying to reset the tone. I know we ran into each other at the farmer's market, and I said if we could start having these conversations earlier instead of April so that our subcommittees could talk to each other, that might make a better process. So I hope we can do that. Thank you.
Counselor Bullock?
Oh, yeah, okay. Let me see. Okay, the project management part of my brain is going crazy here. So I want to thank you for the apology. Like Councilor Wondolowski said, it's refreshing to just have someone come and be like, sorry, I did that. And I want to say, Superintendent Patnout, I emailed you, I don't ever want you to come to this space again and be treated the way that you were treated the month before. I do think that we don't have a code of civility that we have to follow. That was voted down. And so it's really on us to hold ourselves accountable as a body and to use the rules that we have in front of us. And I have, like, as I said to you, I want to be more accountable to those rules and to making sure, I don't think any department head or any employee in our city should be spoken to in a disrespectful manner. And I just don't think there's a need for it. Like, we are passionate and some of us are hotheads, and we can do it without being mean to city employees. I want to just recap. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you are amenable to questions within a reasonable time frame. I do wonder, Councillor Bottomley, if going through the clerk's office again as a main door, especially for items that are going to be on committee agendas, is useful. That is a practice we had in the past, and so it seems like there's been sort of less requests over the last few months, but it seems like something that could be useful. The other thing is, it sounds like you're requesting that if there's any discussion of the school budget, that you guys are invited, which I think is a very reasonable thing to request, that the school committee be present, or someone from the school committee be present in those discussions. I'm still a little fuzzy on what the actual concern is with the sped transportation budget. So if there's like a concise answer to like, what is the issue here? Like, I know the issue that you're talking about now is what got blown up about the questions, but what is the question? What are the questions trying to get at? What is the issue? And then the other thing I just want to lay out is that there was in the past, I mean, I've only been here 3 years, but in my first year, we knew we were going to have a budget issue with the school department. And me and Councillor Healy met with the superintendent and the business manager, who spent an hour and a half with us and went over the school budget and in depth went over transportation, because that was an area that we had a lot of questions about. And so I do wonder if that would be something that, and I think I looked it up the other day, that was in December. So we were like planning for an intense budget year and we were both new counselors trying to get our bearings. And so I do wonder if that type of thing would be more receptive, right? Like, if counselors have questions, are you willing to meet with a counselor or two, especially those on Ways and Means or another committee, that there's something that's going to intersect before we get deep into budget season? Because I do know, especially Ways and Means, those budget meetings get very long the closer we get to May. And last, I do just want to say thank you. I really appreciated the way that the shelter in place was handled last week. As a parent of a kid who was at the school it happened, I was very relieved with the emails right away and the communication from the principals after. So thank you so much.
That is my list of counselors. If anyone else would like to speak to this, otherwise I'm hoping that you will consider maybe taking up the transportation issue either at the next meeting, because I feel like we've been at this for quite a while, and just express my genuine thankfulness that you're here and the comments that you've made, and that I consider this a reset. So I think that's a really good thing for the city, for the council, for the school committee, and we will definitely be in touch. Superintendent, you have not even.
I just want to say, as a resident and a taxpayer in this town, I thank you for your service to our city and your support of the schools over the years, and our continued working relationship. And as I get deeper into this role, I hope these relationships actually solidify and we can be more collaborative in our efforts, because I think we all want the same outcomes. If you are going to table transportation, I did just have a request that on Friday at 3:30, we will be dedicating the field hockey field to Donna Woodcock. If any of you are available, we would love to have you present. I know her mother and her sister would appreciate any attendance if you are available. 3:30.
Thank you. Do we have any last questions, or are we good? Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Great dialogue, and I appreciate our reset.
We will next move to communications from the mayor. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. So I wanted to start by saying I wanted to publicly take ownership for the fact that the benches and the chess table were removed from the end of Miles Street. That was actually the hardest decision that I've had to make thus far, being the mayor. I agonized over it, and it was my best judgment that a change needed to happen at that location. Next, I think you probably all see that our unhoused population is growing. As you know, the Days Inn is full, and CSO will be moving. On the coldest nights last year, CSO made space available as a warming center, and the sheriff's office provided staff. This year, we face additional challenges as neither CSO nor Days Inn are viable options. We've had 2 very successful meetings at City Hall that brought the health department, the fire, police, sheriff's office, and a host of social service agencies gathered together. Paul Leslie from the Salvation Army stepped up and said their space could be utilized on the coldest nights, and the Medical Reserve Corps could help with the staffing. The sheriff's office, I spoke with him today. They would be a backup if using their spot if staffing was unavailable. I had a great conversation with him today. All details are not worked out, but that was a big focus of last month, and I wanted to keep you up to date as Farmers Almanac is predicting a very cold, stormy winter. Next, changes are continuing in the finance department. Catherine and Stella, our new accountant and chief financial officer respectively, are doing a great job. They are a joy to work with, and support from other departments is amazing. Kelly Varner made a huge professional leap and will become the CFO of the YMCA in Northampton. Her last day is Friday, and while we are excited for her, her presence in City Hall will be missed. The assessing department welcomed Jonathan Mejias this month. Assessing is now at full complement and is working hard and collaboratively. They've had 2 evening meetings with Ways and Means on tax rate exemptions and have begun implementing changes in the HERO Act. Additionally, both elected officials, Chuck Green and Jim Geisman, have made themselves available for hours at the senior center and the library. Chuck is at the senior center the 4th Tuesday at 1, and Jim is at the library the 2nd Tuesday, 4 to 5:30, to answer people's questions and let them know what options are available to them within the city. After last city council meeting, in an effort to help finish out the North Build, our procurement and finance team, along with the mayor's office, had a meeting with John Lunt and Fern Smith from GSET to get started on the IFB, information for bid for the North Build. This would be for procuring a reel truck and additional personnel to get some of the hard-to-reach spots that the fiber needs to go. And as you saw from the email correspondence, that IFB is delayed. Next, I wanted to say I met with Kate Martini. She serves on the school committee with me. She's the chair of the budget and finance of our school committee, and Kate's done a fabulous job outlining the budget timeline. For school budget, she handed something out to us last month at the meeting. I saw several of you at Chief Dodge's pinning and swearing in ceremony. It was very heartwarming. Senator Warren's office sent a commendation for Chief Dodge to thank him for the proactive policy changes that he's implementing. And lastly, our office participated in the fair parade as well as the ceremony that marked the 175th anniversary of the Franklin County Fair. I see a local winner here from the Roundhouse. The ceremony took place on Friday afternoon of the fair. Most impressive was the volunteers that make that fair a reality. It was absolutely incredible to hear how many people had been actually volunteering there for 40, 50, or 60 years. So that's all I have for notes, but I'll take any questions that you have.
Any questions from counselors? Counselor Minhas.
Hey, Jenny. I'm not sure if this has been a suggestion that you have come across, but on the subject of warming shelters, has there been an effort by the city to reach out to institutions like various churches around the area? Because that has been done in previous years.
Yes, the second meeting that we had, the first meeting was just staff, and the second meeting we had there was 60 people, maybe 30 in the meeting room and 30 online. Amy Clark was there from the Interfaith Council. So many people that were interested. And again, that warming center is not a shelter for every night. It's on the coldest nights of the year that we'd be doing something like that, a cold snap, et cetera. But I don't think there were too many agencies that were missing from that meeting. It actually was, that was kind of an uplifting something to talk about.
I just had another question, if possible.
Sure.
What is the plan for GSET's expansion? Where are we on that? I know there were some questions about ARPA funding and this and that. What is your plan if they're not going to receive ARPA funding? What is the plan to make sure that they can actually build in that north build?
So $106,000 was left in ARPA for GSET to complete the north build IFB. The previous accountant made an error and neglected to include $14,100 of anticipated expenses not related to the IFB. Today, I instructed Stella to reopen that purchase order for the $14,100 for the non-IFB expense, and to add an additional $56,000 to that, bringing the total ARPA allotted to GSET for the broadband to $800,000. I will need from GSET a detailed accounting of how they're going to spend the additional $56,000, but I'm sure that they will be doing that. Additionally, on July 2nd of 2024, an MBI GAP grant was awarded to GSET in the amount of $758,734. That was great news. And I would not be the person that was providing in-depth details as to how they were doing that, because I don't think that any of you would like me to be explaining all the technical components of how that's actually done.
Counselor Gordon.
Hi, thank you. I'll put my hand down. Thanks for being here, Mayor. Thanks for the updates. Earlier today, I sent you an email, to you and Chief Dodge, in which I asked for more information about the traffic stop and subsequent police search in the Four Corners neighborhood last Friday, and why the city's alert system wasn't activated to warn residents about that, even after a resident was assaulted by one of the people on the run. And I'm very glad to hear Counselor Bullock's comment earlier that the communication from the school was good. I really appreciate that as well. But as both a counselor and a resident of that neighborhood, I think that the communication from the city left something to be desired. So obviously, I just emailed you this afternoon. I don't expect you to have all the answers right now, but I wondered if you have any response to those questions now or thoughts on when we might be able to get answers about that. Because I know a lot of my neighbors and constituents are pretty upset about this. Thank you.
I don't actually have answers for you, Councilor Gordon, on that tonight. I, too, was a little, we've talked a little bit about the communication on that because I believe that the school did a fabulous job notifying the students, and I actually didn't get notified about that. I was getting questions myself, and I've talked to both entities, and communication could be improved on that, and I will get more answers to you on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Counselor Perry.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know that Fisk Avenue removal of the table was a tough decision, but it really didn't solve the problem. It's just people have moved on to the pocket park. They're sitting on the walls. And so the issue was moved, but it hasn't really been resolved. And that's just feedback I've gotten from some people in the community.
I agree, Councilor Perry. It was right on the sidewalk. People were not, there were many people that were afraid to pass by there. And people are there. They have a right to be wherever. Actually, with that new Supreme Court ruling, it's tough. People have a right to be wherever they are. They live here too. There was a lot that was happening right at the edge of the sidewalk there, and I don't have the answer for that. I don't.
Counselor Wondolowski, then Counselor Garrett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just following up, and I echo what Councilor Perry said. It's a difficult situation. I don't know the answer, but I think removing maybe wasn't the right solution. I'm wondering if this could be, and Councilor Gilmore, I'm saying this out loud for the first time, but an item for a future community relations committee, because I think there needs to be more discussion and how we can help folks to have a place to be.
So I will tell you that some thought went into it and some work with, I'm not going to say the person's name, but somebody from one of the social service agencies that was down there working. We tried first shutting off the charger, and I'd been down there, actually sitting down there having lunch, talked to people about this, but things escalated. One night there were a couple of arrests. One night there were 2 arrests. Another night there were 3. There was an overdose right, on the sidewalk there. Multiple complaints from business owners and just citizens on the street that were afraid. It affected not just businesses, but people that were down there with their children. I don't know what the answer was to that, but it did appear that something needed to be done. Happy to have that as a topic for community relations. I definitely reached out to our economic development and to one of the folks in social service agencies to see if we could be down and talking to people, but it got so there were 20 or 25 people. As I said, some of the things that happened.
Councilor Minhas, is it related to this subject or?
Actually, President Bottomley, Councilor Wondolowski mentioned me specifically.
I will let you jump ahead.
Thank you.
And-
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this would be a great topic for community relations to take up. Because it was a difficult decision that you did have to handle, Mayor, and that, people don't see how these decisions happen necessarily. They just hear about them after the decision has been made. And this might be a good chance for us to sort of have that conversation, go over in more detail what had happened. And, if, I support the decision you make. I understand that you're in a really difficult spot. If you did decide that, maybe this is something that could be handled differently, maybe, those things could be moved back or not. I don't want to say what we would be talking about, but I think that this would be a really great topic, and I'll send you an email so that we both remember, that we're going to try and get this on as an agenda item and try and work through that.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
do Counselor Minhas, then Garrett, and then Bullock.
Yeah, Ginny, I'd just like to say thank you for that, because I think a lot of people don't actually realize what happens at those places. They just hear, oh my God, benches are being taken away from homeless people. That place is known around, if you ever, frequent Main Street or go around or have any connection with those homeless people, that place is known as the B. The B is a place where you can go get meth, heroin, crack, any drug that you want. And that was a place where people were actively using. That was a place that I have personally witnessed people being sexually harassed, and that's not okay. That should not be allowed in any public park, in any area, especially your main commercial district. So I think that was a very good decision. People don't necessarily understand that we need to encourage the safety on Main Street. We need to encourage a regular family being able to walk up and down Main Street. Do you want your kids to be in a place where they can see people actively shooting up? No. Now, does that mean, do we, take away those people, throw them in vans and, make them disappear? No, that's not the point. But the point is, you don't make an environment conducive for the behavior that was happening there. And I think a lot of the public didn't realize what was happening there. I personally was witness to active drug use, but also people buying and selling drugs there. That's just not okay. Just a few hundred feet away is the ice cream place. There's kids there. There's families there. You don't want a threatening, drug-infested atmosphere over there. That's just not okay. And everyone knows that. And I feel like everyone knows that. It's just not politically correct to say, hey, we need to stop that. And we have a bench in front of our store. Over the years, once we've had someone pass away there, and a bunch of times we've had people trying to deal drugs there. Thankfully, because of the police department, because of your efforts, we were able to get somebody that was dealing crack, that was dealing heroin. That's just not okay. That needs to stop. That can't continue. So I just want to say thank you for that, and I appreciate it. Now, does that solve the issue? No, but there's less traffic over there. That's no longer known as the place to go and buy drugs anymore. So thank you.
Counselor Garrett?
So one of the things I've always appreciated about Mayor DeSorger is the empathy she has shown to the homeless population in our city. We had a conversation about this subject. I frankly echoed a lot of the concerns that Councilor Perry's and Wendelowski, mentioned, and others. And so I recognize how hard of a decision, and again, the empathy the mayor has with this is there, even though, I think we also both share the goal of a beautiful downtown, and this is not removing benches or moving places for people to be doesn't add to that. So all that aside, one of the question I have is about the police substation. So I had this fantasy that substation would open. I saw the B, I was aware, again, just like everyone else in town, that there were folks who were addicted there, which is not a crime, by the way, to be addicted. It is a thing that a society needs to treat, so I'm really excited and hopeful about these community conversations we're going to have. But I had this idea that you'd have a police officer playing chess with somebody, you know, like, and then again, that may be sweet and naive or whatever you want to say, you know, but it also could be real. And so I'm curious, you know, I know there was a window broken which delayed the opening of the substation. What is the progress on that? And do you think that having that connection with community could potentially allow us to walk and chew gum, for lack of a better phrase, to have public accommodations and, you know, benches downtown, and also a feeling of safety and order, you know, which are both legitimate needs?
Thank you. So the substation had to, I think that went out for bidding to get that done. That makes it take a little longer. So both that and the renovations at the police station are in progress, and I'm not exactly sure when that will be done. When it is, I'm hoping that things will be better there too. I know that Chief Dodge has interviewed one officer, or has pretty much figured out which one of the two officers that's going to be assigned to the downtown. And yeah, I have great visions for that. I'll tell you, the chess table got to me. So, and I had a department head crying about it. I mean, I truthfully, I felt terrible about it. People spent a lot of time working on that pocket part to get it there. But I had parents that called and business owners that called, and I was up till 3 in the morning, and that was the call I made. And there you go. I hope that things will improve, and I hope it will improve when we have a downtown, you know, we've had a downtown presence, but I do think the substation will help. And I do know that's in process, and I can give you a better update on the timeline of that the next time, because I just don't know.
Councillor Bullock?
Okay, I'm not going to make any friends with this one, but I think it was a terrible idea to remove the benches. I drove by with my child, who is 9 years old, and we were both like, what happened? And, you know, removing public benches isn't a solution to the problems that are associated with them in that area. And I, you know, think of myself like as a extremely regular family. I'm married to a man. I have 2 children. You know, like I own a home. I am downtown almost every single day. I'm downtown with my children almost every single day. I let my children go downtown alone. The problem is still there. I've driven by, and when I drove by and noticed the benches were gone, I saw people laying on the grass. I saw people just moved a little further back from the road. So if the road was an issue, the one time I rode by, but like all of this to say that this meeting and the last meeting, there's this like undertone that there's a certain element of folks who aren't residents of our city, and like that needs to stop, because it's just not true. Unfortunately, many children in our city see people doing drugs in their home because we have a high rate of substance use in our city. So many families have to talk to their children about these things, not just when they walk by them on the side of the road. And we know that, right? The social service agencies in our city, they know that. They do that every single day. I would like to see our public resources, time and energy put towards prevention and solving the problem, and not towards taking away things that are part of a public good. You know, the idea that like removing public benches, they serve a benefit beyond just a place for folks that are houseless to sit. Even though that alone would be great. Like that alone, like we should be giving people comfortable places to sit. So I just want to say that I thought it was terrible. I thought that it looked like an eyesore that they were removed to me. My kids, we sit there when we get ice cream. You know, it's not been a barrier. I know many of those folks that are down there. I'm sure unsavory things happen there. I know they do. And the last piece of this is that I have actually noticed a lot of arrests happening of unhoused folks, and I'd love if we could get an update on that in the future, because criminal penalties, arrests, fines, tickets for homelessness or things related to homelessness, they're not going to benefit our city. You know, we live in one of the poorest county in the state. When a family member or someone gets arrested, especially someone who's already unhoused, nothing good is coming of that. Those funds, honestly, should be spent on street outreach, support services. There's the individual, finding an individual. And my daughter saw an arrest on Federal Street, maybe it was just yesterday, and was so upset by it. And as a parent, I just want to say, I have to explain that to my child, right? This is the world we live in. This is the reality. So I just want us to think more holistically about how, and deeper, at a deeper level. We can't just remove the benches. We have to actually deal with the problem that we have. And then I have another, a question about a totally different topic. So I don't know if you want me to wait or just.
No, that's great.
Okay. I have questions about GSET. So I know we got a couple of emails today that I'm assuming round out the once again the why for me, but my understanding is that there was $305,000 in ARPA funds that was removed from the GSET budget. That was taken out of accounts, and that money was already allocated to cover expenses that GSET had incurred based on the impending North build that would reach sort of a big chunk that has not been reached by GSET yet in this build out. My question is, has that money been returned? And then, if it has not been returned, are the amounts that you said, like the $758,000 that came in a grant, and there was another amount that you said, is the expectation that those amounts are covering the $305,000 that has been removed, or is that budget whole? And is the ARPA funding, has it been brought back into that budget? And yeah, so those are my questions, I think, for now.
Okay, so that budget is not brought back to whole, to answer that question. As I said, there was 106,000 left, and today we were putting 56 plus 14, we were putting 70,000 back in.
From ARPA.
From ARPA, okay? There's a lot of make-ready work that needed to be done down that end of town. From what I was looking at, most of that was completed. I am not the expert on the make-ready work, so I'm not going to pretend that I am, but I've been reviewing what we spent on the licenses for 3 separate locations down there. The hut is in there. It looks like it's just about ready to go. In my estimation, that $180,000 should be enough for that part of town, the north builds, to be completed. And if not, I need just better and clearer explanations. It is a fabulous service that I would like to be available to everyone. Everybody that has it loves it. I would like it. I'm sure many other people here, if you don't have it, you like it too. It goes up and down very fast. It's inexpensive and fabulous, and we have great staff that works there. I did need more clarity on what something was being spent what everything was being spent on. I got a lot of documentation, but there is money there. The actual laying of all the fiber, which is already purchased, or 90% purchased, which is on, which is stored on Riddell Street, is there, ready to put up, and there is a little bit more of make-ready work that needs to be done. I'm not going to speak exactly to what that is because I'm not that person. My understanding is some of the other funding is for licensing of areas where it already is, but I'm not going to speak to that.
And so if, I'm confused why the money was removed before the clarification around like how much work needed to be completed and where it actually was completed, which honestly, I don't think I need to know about, but I'm concerned about that. And then I'm wondering if, you know, are you committed to, if the answers come back that, that this build isn't as close to being done as you think, and it can't be completed in $180,000 that remains in the budget, that you're willing to give those funds back to ARPA so that the ARPA funds back to GSET so that the north build can be completed?
Well, I guess I can't see any reason why that couldn't be done for that amount, but because I'm looking at what was already licensed, but there could be something else that I'm not aware of. And I question how much, my question that I have asked is how much all of the licensing throughout the town is going to be. I think it's a reasonable question. If you are the chief financial officer for a city, I've talked with the, you know, Stella that is new there. We just want to see, it was reasonable questions that I asked, how much is it going to cost for all of the licensing to be finished? I just found out today or yesterday about $14,100. I actually was given an agreement that we had, the make-ready contract, but it had no dollar figures in it. I'd never heard of that $14,100 till yesterday.
And is there a reason that the money was taken out of the budget before these specifics were conveyed or communicated? Just in my 3 years, and I know ARPA funding is a new source of funding that hasn't been used a ton, and we don't make decisions on ARPA funding, so there, I mean, to be honest, I came in here saying I don't really have to say anything about GSET because there's nothing we can do about it as a council. Like, it's not, we have no control here other than to ask you questions. But I'm wondering, is there another need for that money? Is that why that money was taken out of those accounts so quickly or without the information being complete on what it's needed for in the future potentially?
So there certainly are other needs, but it is a perfectly good use of ARPA funding for expansion of broadband. It's an excellent use of that. I needed and still do more clarity about what the whole cost of the expansion and licensing is going to be. We do have to make a determination by the end of December for what the remaining funds will be used for. We could use $2 million in sidewalks. We have an elderly population. The sidewalks just from the Weldon to the center of town are atrocious. I walked on Maple Street today. Easily, that money could be eaten up by infrastructure, any one of infrastructure needs, and that's what it will be used for, something that I think we probably all could agree on. Something that would save the taxpayers in the long run because it's something that's needed.
Okay, I appreciate your answers, and I might email you more questions. Thank you.
I'm happy to answer them, whatever they are. And thank you for your opinion. I didn't expect everybody to agree with me on the decisions at the end of Mile Street. I just wanted to say that in the end, somebody needed to make that decision. If I weren't the mayor, I think I'd probably agree with you.
Yep. I'm
Okay?
glad I didn't make that decision.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from counselors? Seeing, Counselor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you. Just well, I hope this is a quick question. We'll see. I was surprised, Mayor, and I think a number of residents were surprised to hear that Chief Dodge's status was being changed from interim to permanent without there being any kind of formal search process. And I certainly offer my best wishes to Chief Dodge. I look forward to working with him. And this question means absolutely no disrespect to him at all. But I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little more about how the decision was made not to conduct a search, because I think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity. I think that there could have been some community dialogue about what public safety means for us, what we wanted to see from police leadership, particularly in the wake of a particularly chaotic period, challenging period surrounding our police department. So I'm just curious how that decision was made. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Gordon. So I think part of what you said is the reason why that decision actually was made. It was a chaotic period. There was a lot of instability within, I would say, instability and unsettledness within that department. Chief Dodge had probably about 5 or 6 months that he was in there, was seen to do a fabulous job, and the calm and collaboration within the department. Many people telling me what a fabulous job he was doing. A nationwide search was going to add a lot more disruption, et cetera, and I felt that we had somebody in there that was doing a good job. So that was a decision that, again, I made, and I didn't expect that everyone would agree with me. I did not think at this particular time in history that that was what this community, the people here, and that police department needed, and it was my call, and I'll own that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Any more questions? Seeing none, we will move on to other communications from city employees. We've invited FERCOG and our planning board chair to, thank you, Mayor, to come speak to us as part of ongoing communications about our upcoming vote, which will probably be in October or November on cluster development. And I don't know if they're here in person or...
We're online.
Oh, both online. Thank you for being here. And the plan for this is to give your presentation to us so all the counselors can see this and try to keep our questions brief because this is returning to EDC. This was we felt this was important enough that it deserved to be at the full council, more public knowledge of it, more public potentially input that could come from having this presentation here. So I'm not sure who wants to take it away.
Well, I will thank you, President Bottomley, and thank you to the council for the invitation to be here. And I know that Allison has a very effective presentation planned. I just wanted, if I could, make a couple of process-related questions or comments first, and then after her presentation, I had a couple of content-related points. As far as the process, one thing is I do want to echo and emphasize something that Councilor Gordon mentioned at the EDC meeting last week, that this is an existing part of the zoning ordinance. And so it's not something new that's being proposed. It's amendments to the existing open space cluster development section of the zoning ordinance. And crucially, one section of it, section B, the purpose, is totally unchanged. And so the 5 items that are listed there of why we have this in the first place are the same. There's no recommendation of changing those. It's more, as Allison will get into the details, It's about how we achieve that purpose. And the other process thing I wanted to mention is this has been a 2-year process, as Allison will say. And we've had in that interim a lot of turnover on the planning board. I'm the only planning board member who was there when we started this process. But I did want to emphasize that a few months ago, when we had repopulated the planning board, we did kind of a reset, and Allison gave a very detailed history of the process we've gone through and all the recommended changes to date. And so all the current planning board members were be able to be very engaged in the process. And we had a fresh start and had some new wisdom from some of the newer board members, so we adjusted some of the proposal accordingly. So I just wanted to give those 2 points for context, and I'll pass it along to Allison. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, George, for the introduction, and thank you, counselors, for having us here tonight. As George mentioned, I'm just going to give a quick presentation, and I should be able to get them up. That look okay over there? Okay, I can see it on the Zoom. So as George mentioned, I'm Allison Gage. I'm a senior land use and natural resources planner at the FERCOG, and I've been working with the planning board over the past 2 years on this update. So I'm going to give an overview of why we embarked on this project in the first place, and then George and I are available to answer any questions you may have. We did a public hearing a couple weeks ago, and I think I appreciate the opportunity to share this all with you so we can get more feedback before bringing it to a vote. So this project came about because the FERCOG got a grant from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to do a watershed scale zoning project. And with funds from the grant, we're working with several towns throughout the Deerfield River watershed to align land use regulations to better protect water quality by reducing pollutant loadings from new development and redevelopment projects. We chose to plan at the watershed scale for this project because of how land use regulations in one town can positively or negatively impact water quality in neighboring towns within the same watershed. So if you think of the Green River watershed, for example, all of the land uses in upstream Vermont can impact Greenfield's water supply because all of that water within the watershed is flowing to the same point. So for example, stormwater runoff from excessively wide roads or large parking lots, sprawling large subdivisions upstream in a watershed can result in increased temperatures and pollutant loadings, erosion and sedimentation, and loss of groundwater recharge downstream. The more extreme rainfall events and droughts due to climate change are only worsening these problems and reducing an increased stress on water bodies, which was another motivating factor for this work. So 2 years ago, I met with the planning board and went over some possibilities for making improvements that would benefit the Deerfield River watershed as a whole. We went over general options for updating the cluster development ordinance, conducting a mapping analysis to find opportunities that would better allow for infill, redevelopment, or adaptive reuse, and then strategies to preserve and protect agricultural land. Ultimately, the board decided to move forward with updating the open space cluster development ordinance because that would provide more opportunities to have an influence on stormwater management. So before I cover the details of your current ordinance and what we're proposing, I wanted to provide a quick visual on what an open space cluster or open space design is. Essentially, this is a type of development that seeks to move away from building homes on large lots that take up a lot of resources and putting homes closer together and then permanently protecting the rest of the land. So on the left, you see here the traditional subdivision with the large lots, and then on the right is an example of a cluster development. So in a lot of cases, the land is permanently protected, but there are community features such as walking or hiking trails that are available to the public. Other benefits of cluster developments include a reduced cost to developers because there's less infrastructure and it's cheaper to maintain. It's one road versus long and wide one. And then broadly speaking, there's also water quality benefits because there's less impervious surfaces. As George mentioned, at present, you already have an open space cluster development as a part of the ordinance, and it applies to parcels that are 5 acres or larger. The updates that we're proposing seek to make your ordinance more aligned with goals stated in the city's sustainable master plan and guide future development under this ordinance in a way that will benefit the community. So at present, your zoning ordinance allows cluster developments in all residential zoning districts with an open space protection requirement of 25%. Multifamily homes are allowed, but they cannot exceed more than 30% of the total number of dwelling units. And in order to cluster the homes, the developer can shrink lots down to the minimum lot requirement of the downtown area. So your rural residential, the RC district, which is the lightest color, the lots in a cluster development can be shrunk down to the size, the minimum lot size of the lots in the urban residential district. Do you want to ask a clarifying question, Counselor?
I just raised my hand. Are you talking to me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I just realized with this slide, I just started getting lost with all the different acronyms and it's moving kind of quickly and I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
Could you like go back 3 sentences ago to to this slide? I want to make sure we're all following
Yeah, so with the minimum lot sizes.
you. Yeah, just there was like a bunch of different acronyms and numbers all at once.
Okay,
So I
yeah.
don't have a specific question. All I know is I suddenly wasn't following and
Yeah, and I'm sorry that this font is really bizarre. When I downloaded it, it like shifted into this terrible, I don't know, so that's making it harder to read. But so you have 3 residential districts. It's the RA, RB, and RC. Urban residential is this downtown area in the dark green. And then you have your suburban residential, which is this neon green, and your rural residential district, which is like the outer Greenfield, the Meadows area. So if you look at the dimensional table in your zoning ordinance, the minimum lot sizes for each of these districts are different. The minimum lot size in the urban residential district is 8,000 square feet. Whereas in the rural residential district, so this larger area, it's 40,000 square feet. So the only way that you can shrink the lot sizes in the rural residential district is to do a cluster development. And when you do that, you can make the lot size 8,000 square feet instead of the minimum of 40,000. Does that make sense? And if it doesn't, that's okay. And I can try and explain it in a different way.
I'm not sure, Counselor Bottomley, is it okay if I paraphrase what I think I hear him saying?
Just keep in mind, folks, that we have 30 minutes for this. So
Exactly.
they got their presentation and then questions. So if we go into questions now, they may not be able to finish their presentation because I'm holding this to 30 minutes.
So my preference, that's what I was anticipating. I can ask the follow-up later. Thank you.
Okay. So cover the minimum lot sizes in the current ordinance, and then for multifamily, you can have multifamily homes in cluster districts, but they can't exceed more than 30% of the total number of dwelling units. So yeah, I think that's really the highlights from your current ordinance. And this is going to go into the proposed changes, and I'm only going to cover the 4 primary changes. We did make some line edits, but I'm just going to highlight the main proposals. So the first change that we're proposing is increasing the amount of required protected open space in the most rural residential. So that was the lighter green RC district from 25% to 50%. We looked at similar zoning regulations from other towns in Franklin County and found that Greenfield's requirement was a little low. In reviewing Greenfield's ordinance, we compared it to Mass Audubon's bylaw review toolkit for promoting low impact development, and they actually suggest a best practice would be conserving up to 75% of the parcel, but in looking at the land that is left that could realistically be subdivided in Greenfield, we determined that 50% of a permanent protection requirement would be a better balance of allowing for building more housing while protecting forest lands and habitat. Oops, sorry. So the second proposed change is to the calculation for the maximum initial number of dwelling units so that we are not penalizing the developers for the features of the parcel. And again, this is not the easiest to explain, so I'm going to do my best and then we can answer any questions. But what we mean by this is that if you were trying to subdivide a parcel that was somewhat hilly on one side and had some wetlands, although you're not going to be able to build on that particular part of the parcel, we're now only going to reduce the amount, reduce 10% of that amount of land from the net acreage calculation. So that way the developers allocated more units up front. And this is important because the net acreage is what the developer would base the number of units off of, because that's what they're going to divide by the minimum lot size. So it's just revising this to give a little bit of a higher density up front. And then third, this is really the biggest change to the ordinance. It's a bonus density system to further incentivize the building of more units with features that will hopefully benefit the community. We base some of the criteria off of what neighboring towns are offering in their bonus, such as Shelburne and Sunderland. And the idea here is that if a developer meets a certain criteria or includes it in their development plan, they would be awarded with a number of extra units that they can build on the parcel. And that increase in density will be possible because of how the developer can shrink lot sizes down when building under this ordinance. And to simplify things, we went with a percent density increase instead of a point system. And I realize this is hard to read, but just for the sake of a couple of examples, if a developer chose to allocate more than 30% of their buildable lots to two-family, we did scratch that requirement from the original ordinance, or proposing that as a change. So if they allocate more than 30% of their buildable lots to two-family, three-family, or multifamily homes, that would give them a 10% bonus. Or if they chose to install solar PV on all roofs, that would be another 10%. Or if the design included public recreational activity by way of walking trails, that would give them a 5% bonus. Some communities put a limit on how much of a density bonus you can receive, but we chose not to, and instead thought that water and sewer infrastructure should be the natural limit. And then the last change that we made is to the subdivision regulations. The section that we added is a conservation analysis and findings section, so that the Planning Board and Conservation Commission have an opportunity to work with the developer to identify areas of the parcel that may be more important to the city to conserve, and where development would best be sited. We did discuss that this could, and if applications came forward, would create extra work for the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. But in looking at the number of parcels in Greenfield that could be subdivided, we determined that adding in that stipulation would be worth it to give the city more of a say in more of a say in the process. So those are the primary changes, and just a quick overview of what we've worked on. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm happy to hear feedback on if there are other things that you would want to see in a future draft.
Before we get to that, I just wanted to get back to George. I didn't know if you wanted, you said you had some comments. I didn't know if you wanted them at the end of this presentation before we go into questions, or if you wanted to just go right into questions.
Yeah, they're brief. I'll make them really quickly, and they're responsive to a couple of points that were brought up at the EDC meeting last week. One was in the density bonus, one feature that someone suggested should be added was accessibility. There are things about affordability of units and affordable senior housing, but there isn't something for accessibility per se. And I don't think, Allison, we ever talked about that. I mean, I can say the board is certainly sensitive to and supportive of issues of accessibility, But that wasn't something that was included. I just wanted to comment on that. The other thing was that the question was raised by a member of the public and then echoed by one of the counselors in the EDC about whether the it might be considered to apply this part of the zoning ordinance to a parcel that was less than 5 acres. And that is something that never came up during our deliberations. We were just sticking with the established 5 acre standard. So I just wanted to point those out. Thank you.
Thanks. I guess we'll open this up to questions. Counselor Bullock.
I have two, actually, sorry, George just answered one of my questions. So I have one question, which is, you said when you were talking about how you increased the open space in the RC district, like you increased the open space requirements, were the open space requirements in the suburban and urban district not increased? And is there a reason for that, or that? Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a reason?
George, I can answer that or take a.
Go ahead. Thank you, Alice.
Okay. Yeah, so we left the open space requirement at 25% in the, let me pull up that map so I can look at it. There we go. Okay, so we left it at 20% and 25% in the suburban residential and rural residential district. Just because the parcels that could realistically be subdivided in these areas are much smaller than what's out in the rural residential district. So we were trying to be reasonable in terms of supporting opportunities for housing and protecting open space. So I don't know, just to pick on this property, we would want, this seems more realistic to conserve more land than something much smaller down here.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense, because like, as I'm looking at that, I'm like, where is there even 5 acres
Yeah.
of continuous buildable lots within those, within that district? So thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Gordon.
Thanks. And Allison and George, thank you so much for this presentation. I think that the conversation in EDC last week was confusing, partly because, there were multiple zoning and housing related items on that agenda that were being discussed. And I think that even for counselors and certainly for members of the public, it was, it was too easy to think that they were kind of all part of the same proposal, and that a lot of things were being changed all at the same time. So I hope that this helps assuage some of the concerns that members of the public had about that, because it's, I think, important for us to consider this on its own. And I also appreciate that it's going back to committee, because I think that there are more conversations to have about it. But I'm curious, who do you think are the developers that will hopefully be attracted to, this kind of zoning change? I think there's been some concern about big kind of profit-seeking developers, rushing in. And I've heard you say, and I know from talking to other planners around the valley, that, that kind of developer really isn't interested in a city like Greenfield, because of our size and demographics and such. So if you can clarify, where Greenfield sits on the radar of housing developers, that might be helpful.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question about housing developers, but I could certainly talk to my housing colleagues. From my perspective, I am just interested in providing more opportunities for good stormwater management and land protection. George, I don't know if you have a better answer.
I unfortunately don't. I can't offer a real informed perspective on that. It's unfortunate. Eric Twarg was hoping to be here and wasn't able to be, but he might be able to offer some perspective, especially since this process is still continuing. Might be a good question for him.
Yeah, and another question for Eric, I haven't asked since we started this process, but if there have been any before, when this ordinance was first introduced, if there were any developers that were interested in it, and what those conversations were like. I don't know if there have been any.
Counselor Master Totaro.
Thank you. I think is probably meant for
If you could bring
your,
the microphone a little closer.
This is a reference to the proposed amendments from August 9th. The GI, general industry, is our present zoning for that. It's pretty much filled up. I moved into my home in 1988. I live just off of Wells Street. In 1989, unbeknownst to most of the people in that area, the swath of Wells Street and definitely the lower end of Chapman Street was rezoned general industry. And that has made, there are businesses there now, by right, that have made life miserable for the abutting residents. So I know that you have changed from special permit to yes by right, accessory dwelling units within.
Point of order, I don't think you're talking about the same issue that we're talking about. You're talking about ADUs.
Well, no, it's beyond that. Yes, it's ADUs, but it's multiple levels. But my point is I would not wish that on anyone to live in a home that's zoned GI, and so I think that perhaps that should be revisited, your amendment, and of course we can deal with that at a later time. But
Point of order,
Because
none of this
this-
has to, yeah, sorry, none of this has to do with that area.
Keep in mind, these issues still will come back to EDC, so there'll be able to be discussion on also an EDC meeting. Counselor Golub and then Toronzo.
I just wanted to share the same point that I think that part of the confusion that's happening is that there's several housing changes being proposed. And right now, the issue at hand is the cluster zoning, not the ADUs, which are distinct issues. And I think it's important that we discuss them as distinct issues because we will be deciding on them as distinct issues.
Counselor Toronzo.
I guess maybe this question might be more for the planning board chair, but maybe Allison, you have some insight into this too. If we shrink the lot sizes essentially down in the RC district, I'm presuming that might have, would that have, I shouldn't presume it, would that have effect on the current setback requirements for those? Would they have to be still built with regard to the current zoning requirements in those areas, or will there be exceptions made to those if it's a cluster development?
So that part is not changing. That part is already in your current ordinance in terms of being able to shrink the lots. But then, yeah, my understanding is you would still have to meet the frontage requirements.
And same thing with all of them, side yard, backyard setbacks?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Minhas.
So I just have a couple questions. One, has there been any cooperation and outreach done to understand if this is possible around here with other department heads like the DPW? Have you guys reached out and been like, hey, okay, if there is a development going to go in, what effect will that have on water and sewer and electricity and roads and all of that? Has that been done? Specifically with the DPW?
That would be a question for Eric. To my knowledge, I have not done that.
I would agree. That would be a question Eric would be better informed to respond to.
We have about 4 minutes left if there are more questions.
I just have my main issue with any housing proposal is that I want to center homeowners and the potential to create new homeowners. Because I have the firm belief that it's not just important to place someone in, within the confines of four walls and a roof. It's important that that person has the possibility to own that place and to build equity and to have a shot at being middle class. Does this development proposal, require any form of home ownership?
Well, Allison, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the ownership model that would apply isn't dictated by this. It's just what is specified is how the excuse me, built environment will be in relation to the natural environment. But it could be rental, it could be homes that people would purchase, could be condos. Would you agree, Allison? Is that?
Yes. Yep, I agree.
There's no such current requirement as it stands. There's no requirement that it has to be home ownership at all.
No, it could be any of those options, rental, condos, or individual home ownership.
Yeah, that's not dictated by their ordinance.
So I have.
But to your point, the purpose of cluster developments in general, I think, is to spur more housing that is affordable. You're not building huge houses on huge lots. It's providing more housing options, ideally.
I have Councilor Garrett next. We're getting within 2-3 minutes.
I will be as quick as I can. So one question that I believe I know the answer to, because I'm looking at the slideshow you just presented about the Conservation Commission. So am I right in understanding what I'm reading, that the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board would effectively have a veto on any cluster developments that didn't fit the standards of conservation that we're aiming at? If they don't approve, they say this site plan is going to destroy some prime farmland, ruin the neighborhood, whatever it might be, they can say no.
That process as written is really to give them more of a say in where the developer is locating the houses and the preserved land. I mean, I assume that the idea behind it is so that they can work together and guide where that is. But I guess potentially they could. Right.
And another question just that came up at the last meeting, and about the less than 5 acre development. I know that we were having a conversation about if it was a non-substantial change, we could make changes. Would something like that be considered substantial enough that we would have to go back to the beginning and restart the process, or could that be something that's amended at EDC next month, for example, if we so as a committee decided that's something we're interested in? Did we ever get clarification? You know what I'm asking? Amending the lot size? Yeah.
So changing it so that you could do a cluster division on a lot that's smaller than 5 acres?
Yeah, because there was a conversation about substantial versus, non-substantial changes, and we're apparently allowed to do a non-substantial change, but we weren't clear in the meeting, so I wasn't sure if any clarity has been found in that.
I can just respond, Councilor Garrett. Generally, I have deferred to Eric and Clerk Scott in making that judgment.
Okay. And yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you.
So we've hit our time limit. If I get a sense from the council that you want to continue, we can go for a few more minutes.
President Bottomley?
Yeah.
I have said very little in this meeting, and I can keep my 2 questions very, very brief.
Let me just quick, does the council want to continue 5 minutes? Because we had agreed to 30 in the agenda. Okay, I'm getting a sense that we want to continue. So let's continue for another 5 minutes, and hopefully I've got, I'll let you go, Counselor Golub, then Garrett, Bullock, and Toronzo.
Okay.
Okay.
The first question about home ownership. Could zoning law stipulate ownership, or does zoning law ever apply to ownership of buildings or homes?
I have not seen that personally, but my understanding is that like one of our density bonuses is to do deed restricted affordable housing. You know, that is something that you can do through this ordinance, but you can't, yeah, I have not seen a mandate for how the home is owned.
Okay, and so deed restricted affordable housing is permissible or supported by this ordinance?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is, thank you to, I think it was George who brought up that accessibility had not been mentioned as in the list of reasons to increase density, and I would love to see that. Wherever that amendment comes, I want to make sure that that would happen.
Yeah, we could definitely add in a line for universally accessible.
Thank you.
Counselor Bullock, then Counselor Toronzo, and that should wrap it up.
I had a question about newer buildings. I don't know, they were probably built 8 years ago now, 10 years ago, that are on Deerfield Street. There's like multiple small units right next to the fish sculpture. Are those considered a cluster development? I'm just trying to think of examples that the council can visualize within our city. Are those considered a cluster development or of the like, or were those by special permit? Does anyone know? There's maybe 4 or 5 small units that were sold at an affordable. Yes.
They're on the other side of the fish plant. They're down on the other side of the bridge. On the north end of Deerfield Street. I think it was an old motel or something back in the day.
So were those considered a cluster development, or is that different because it's a smaller lot that I don't know that the lot's smaller than 5 acres, but did that go through like what would normally be subdivision, but then did a special permit to cluster like that? Or is that an example is what I'm trying to get to?
I don't believe it's an example, no,
Okay.
of cluster development. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Toronzo.
So I guess this is kind of a quick but two-part question. Going along with the idea of the setbacks, would if you were to build multiple units on one parcel of land, would they each be subject to, like, say, be separated by the same setback that your neighbor, let's say I got a neighbor next door in our house, you know, we got to be 20 feet from the side. So if not, is the house or the buildings closest to the side of the property still fall under that, but do the inside of the property, do they have to also adhere, like you'd still have to have 20 feet between each building if you were to build multiple buildings? That's part one, I guess. Okay.
I'm George, did you want to try and answer that?
No, I'm not clear on that. Go for it
Okay,
if you
yeah,
can.
I might have lost you as well. I'm really sorry. If you look, I think some of your questions could be answered. I'm looking at the city council packet, so it's on page 33 of that PDF, and if you look at the dimensional requirements, the stipulations are in there. So in a cluster development, the lot frontage and lot width may be reduced to a minimum of 50 feet in all three of the residential zoning districts. And then the minimum front and rear setback requirements in the open space per lot shall be the same as normally required in the district. The side yard requirement shall be 10 feet for single and two-family dwellings and 20 feet for multifamily structures in all the districts. And then the planning board may reduce by up to 1/2 the setbacks if they find that such reduction will result in a better design.
Okay, so that right there is a change from what we currently have.
No, that is all the same.
So RC district, you have to have 20 feet of side yard, not 10, currently. And the most that you can get for a reduction is 20% to that side yard setback. So the closest you can get is 16 feet. I only say this because I had to go through this exact process and pay a bunch of money to get 4 feet closer to my property.
So then it already exists, when the planning board originally put this ordinance in place, those were the stipulations. But we did not change as a part of this project any of those requirements.
Okay, so we have to relook at whether or not we're actually enforcing that same thing right now. But my other question would be was spurred by the idea of ownership of these. So if you were to have multiple buildings built on one building lot and then owned by different owners, is this just going to be I was going to say a cluster, something else, of if somebody wants to sell their property, are we looking at a bunch of easements for each person, or how would they know where their line ends and the next person's begins if they're all in the same parcel of land?
So,
They would all separate?
Sorry, I couldn't hear, someone else was talking, but you wouldn't have multiple structures on a lot. I mean, so you have, like, imagine your 20-acre parcel, that's going to get subdivided into smaller lots, and there's only going to be one structure on each lot. So there's not going to be a situation in which you have 3 houses on one lot and then you have to deal with parsing that out.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So then, and you're saying that those lots can be much smaller because of the way they're developed. I guess my concern is for what's already existing and then what zoning has been changed in different areas, that then it becomes, and trust me, I would like to encourage the builds of these, and I don't think we need as much wide open as we have, right? I don't think our requirements need to be as they are currently, but is there going to be some sort of, from the planning board's kind of view, would there be some sort of change to requirements for existing structures already? If essentially you're allowing something to be built there as a cluster development, you're allowing a smaller parcel to be made, then if somebody were to buy a single parcel of land, they would still have to follow that 40,000 square feet, right? You wouldn't be able to, you can't just subdivide a parcel up there other than what you're saying, other than for this cluster kind of development. It just seems like one portion is reaping some benefits that the other parcels cannot currently. So I didn't know if there was going to be any kind of changes to whether it would be special permitting for existing plots that are up there, because it obviously would come into, and I know that's not what this one's about, but it could come into other questions around some of the other zoning stuff that is out there right now, and just to kind of get a bearing on the consistency of a zone that we've created.
I mean, this would apply to new developments, so it wouldn't impact something that already exists. If I'm understanding your
Right,
your
yeah,
point
yeah, no,
correctly.
I get that. What I'm saying is if there's now a smaller allowable parcel that's there solely because it's being built as a cluster development, a single development wouldn't get that. You couldn't just buy a single parcel at 8,000 square feet up in that area is what I mean. So it seems like, I know, and I understand that we'd be trying to make an exception so that we get better development in that way, but there's also the question of would there be any more leniency in any kind of special permits or variances in that larger parcel zone because of these very different rules that would be applied to a parcel of land than if it were just a single purchase?
I think that would be a whole different project, which we,
Right.
could take on if we want to,
Sure.
take a good look at the dimensional table, and make those considerations. Then, yeah, I'm all for that as a part of a new project.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that ends this part of the meeting, and I really want to thank you, Allison and George, both for being here and taking the time to further help explain this to us. I think it's going to really help when it comes to a vote and when it gets to EDC again. So thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
You bet.
Thank you all.
I hate to do this, but we have public comment coming up. We have quite a few speakers, and we're past the time we take to take a break. I think we really need to take a 5-minute bathroom break, and we'll
Hey,
return.
President Bottomley,
Yes.
before we move off communications from other employees, I understand there's some GSET people in the House. I was wondering if we'd, since a couple of councilors were asking previous questions to the mayor, if we could talk to the GSET staff who are there in the building.
Yeah, GSET is not on the agenda, and they had asked that, and we can get into this later, but we really have policies we follow. We got some emails at the last minute on a subject. We have a 5-day rule. We had the September 11th, but was a rule to get agendas in to talk about, and I believe the motivation was simply because the mayor had GSET as an agenda item. That's not a reason to add another department to speak. So we won't be doing that tonight unless it becomes absolutely necessary to ask a question of GSET. I've said they can do an update in October or November. It may need to be November. It's on the committee chair's agenda because the state reps are coming in October. That's going to be a full meeting, especially if we vote on cluster development. So that's where I stand right now. So we'll take a 5-minute break. All right, we're all back. We'll be moving to public comment now, and I will start with Eric Hollowell. And again, just a reminder for everyone to please state your name and address, and we'll be following our usual 3 minutes. Yep, it just takes a second. There you go.
Hi, my name's Eric Hollowell. I live at on Homestead Ave, and I'm here to talk about the cluster development. I don't really see the need for it. I think you guys really need to think long and hard. 8,800 square feet. That's 11 houses on a 5-acre property with 50%. Right now in an RC, it's what, 1 acre? That's 5 houses. How's that impact traffic in that area? People move to a rural area because they don't want to be around traffic. Now you're talking traffic and everything else. You've ruined that community out there. I think the town needs to think about it, not vote on it on October, and I think it needs to go to a vote for the townspeople, and not, why is it 50%? The Audubon said it should be 75%. Why'd they choose 50%? These are things you need to really think long and hard about. I don't think the answers are here. It doesn't seem like there's a real need for it to me. In Greenfield, our population hasn't changed in 100 years. That's all I need to say.
Thank you. Susan Morgaftig.
Susan Morgaftig, Forest Avenue. Councilors, thank you for giving us the space to be able to speak this evening. I am speaking for myself only and not for Housing Greenfield, as we have not taken a vote on any of these issues. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the open space cluster development amendments. I believe that the amendments that went before the Economic Development Committee are sound and should be approved. I do have two additions, and they've already been talked about tonight. One being the 5-acre stipulation. I think it could go down to 3 and it would be fine. It would still have rural character, but it would allow for smaller parcels to possibly be used in terms of cluster development. I would also like to note that the incentives do not include one for accessibility. I don't know if we have to make sure that people have full accessibility to at least some housing. It's the biggest problem that we have right now in Greenfield is we do not have accessible housing. And as this population grows older, it's really essential that we be able to have that. The second thing I'd like to discuss is the definition of open space. Open space, as considered within this amendment and within both the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, is for agricultural, conservation, or recreation. That's the definition of what those lands are. It is not our backyards. And it's important because there's been a lot of discussion using that term where open space is used for just any vacant lot, and that's not where we're at right now. Which brings me to my third point, ADUs. The great brouhaha around ADUs in Greenfield is, I believe, overblown. The state's decision to allow ADUs by right is now being considered by the Executive Office of Livable Communities, and there are going to be refinements to what the law actually means. And until we have those refinements, I think it's crazy to try to figure out what Greenfield should do. I don't support ADUs on small lots that cannot support them, but I also believe the amount of attention being given to this subject is more than is necessary right now. As I already noted, open space does not include backyards. And because they are expensive to build, ADUs are not going to be built on a whim in our backyards in Greenfield. I look forward to the refinements on this law that are in process. It's also true that the best way to make ADUs and their misuse unlikely is to build enough affordable and accessible housing, both for ownership and for rent, to make them unnecessary. So I encourage those who have great concerns about ADUs to put their energy into building such housing. And I thank you very much for your time, and I also want to suggest that we talk about short-term rental ordinance at some point in the future.
Thank you. Next is Sarah Brown.
Good evening, city councilors, or really good night at this point. My name's Sarah Brown, and I'm at 112 Stone Farm Lane. I've already met some of you in the subcommittee meetings, and I wanted to take the time to introduce myself since I submitted an application to be Greenfield City Councilor at large. I've always wanted to be involved in local politics, and sorry, apologies that public speaking isn't my jam, but I'm trying. I've always wanted to be involved in local politics because it makes a tangible difference in making people's lives better. Thank you all for your tireless effort and countless hours of meetings to make Greenfield a better place to live. I'm looking forward to learning from you all and continuing to engage in this process. I'd like to share a little bit about my background and why I believe I'd make an ideal public servant. I'm very values-oriented and practical, and I can navigate well between the big picture and all the little details necessary. I have experience in community organizing for environmental justice and affordable housing. For example, here in Greenfield, I created Redistro Free Store, which operates as a free thrift store open to the public. I was also a driving force in the acquisition this summer of 32 acres on Stone Farm Lane for Valley Community Land Trust, which is a nonprofit that will keep the land permanently affordable and off the speculative market. This project was possible through the collaboration with a design builder and housing co-op who now lease the land, and many generous donors and support from the broader community. The housing co-op provides accessible home ownership that is self-governed, and the developer will create more units of mixed income ecological housing that will be clustered to preserve open space. I believe these projects speak to my ability to both work hard and work collaboratively. I would bring the same commitment to Greenfield City Council. I believe my background in housing and climate justice are useful for analyzing decisions. I'm very good at giving free labor, which is unfortunate for my parents. And I have a lot of capacity to help the city operate for the benefit of all. I'd be eager to learn the ropes and get to know everyone and truly understand the issues. And from there, I believe I'd be able to think creatively and take initiative as needed. So I do have a lot of experience being behind the scenes, getting things done, not so much with public speaking. And regardless of the decision, I'm hopeful to continue attending city council meetings and being engaged. And thanks for all your commitment and stamina in these very long meetings. And I'm happy to continue any of these conversations beyond this meeting with anyone here. And feel free to reach out to me by email or phone. Thank you.
Thank you. Jen Stromson.
Hi, folks. I have notes, so I won't go on. I am Jen Stromston. I live in Precinct 5 at 40 Russell Street. Just for the record, sidetrack, I'm pro-housing, pro-density, and pro-public spaces for all. Neither here nor there. Thank you, Council. Thank you in particular, Councilor Bullock, for asking questions and right-sizing the record. So I'm an unpaid volunteer. I was appointed, this is my third mayoral administration under which I'm serving as a GSET commissioner. I know a thing or two, but I don't know everything. And I rely on the staff to provide facts. I want to just say I serve because I believe in rural internet and that communities are well served by having alternatives to the telecom monopolies. And I think information access is a fundamental equity issue. And we can talk about who gets what, but if we don't build it, it doesn't really matter. We don't make the pie bigger all the time. Straight up, a lot of the math that was tossed around by the mayor was just not factual. Councilor Bullock's questions pointed to the correct numbers. The mayor mentioned some other dollar amounts. The way that grants work, unfortunately, is you can't just move stuff around. So the money that the ARPA money is supposed to be spent on, the projects is supposed to be spent on, we can't take other grant money and spend it on that. We have been awarded some grants because the state thinks we're doing a good job, and the federal dollars have come in to allow us to do some other cool things, including the Weldon build, which we had to win competitively against other telecoms. But we can't use that money to do what the ARPA money was intended for. And that's probably a good thing, because when we say we're going to do a thing with money, we should be held to that, right? That's how grant money works. I want to just point out a discrepancy that I think is kind of glaring, which is that we spent an hour on having the superintendent and the school board here to give direct answers and transparency and detail, but then the discussion of GSET did not include the general manager who was here in the room, the chief operations person who was here in the room, or the chair or vice chair. So I just think, get consistent. If you want actual factual information, like allow the town staff and the people who've spent years working on this to speak directly and provide that information. And the mayor can provide a justification for the decision she is entitled to make. She can do what she wants with that money, right? That's pretty much been established as far as we can tell. But that's a different conversation than making up numbers about what was or wasn't moved around here or can be spent on whatever. I think that there's some questions that are being asked that are genuine, and I'm going to kind of stick to that. I think some of it's looking for an excuse not to let the ARPA money stay in the GSET account, but I think there's embedded in there a question that gets to something that we all need to think about in municipal finance, right? I think the mayor wants to know all of the money we're ever going to spend on polls, and that's a 5, 10, 20-year capital plan. And that's something we could consider doing. It's not something we're required to do. It's not something that's done easily. It's a great way to try to do infrastructure. And those are fine questions. But that's not a reason not to give the ARPA money where it was promised. I'll stop there. If you want to be mad at all the billions of dollars of your state and federal dollars that were spent going to like Comcast and all kinds of other companies that didn't deliver rural broadband, right? We're delivering value and we're delivering internet. And we're doing it for the citizens, not for stockholders, not for shareholders, not for shareholder value, right? We're trying to give like actual speeds of what you're paying for and have accountability, right? When you call up GSET, you get FERN.
Thank you so much. Evelyn, ooh, I can't read that. Wolfcool. Thank you.
Oops. Hi. Evelyn Wolfcool, 75 Prospect Street. I'm here tonight out of a deep concern for the future of both GSET and all of the employees of this town. As a customer of GSET, I've been consistently impressed with the service and professionalism of our town internet. I've followed the progress of the organization from its beginning and have seen the real pressures it's been under to simultaneously be fully built out and also operating within an extremely tight budget that severely limits its ability to expand. Yet, with scarcely more than a skeleton crew, skilled workers behind GSET have managed to operate on a monetary knife's edge, strategically planning to bring expanded service to fruition while providing consistently great and professional service to its existing customers. I'm saddened to hear of the potential clawback of previously allocated ARPA funding. This will undoubtedly unravel the plans that staff of GSET have put considerable time and planning into having made, and once again slow the forward motion of this important town service. We cannot keep cutting off the legs of this program and asking it to jump. But more than anything else, I'm here in support of the staff of this town. I'm seriously concerned at the number of resignations already tendered and very worried that more may be under consideration. It feels essential to show support to our city staff, recognizing that those who have passed up private sector opportunities to work for this town are being undervalued. Rescinding promised project funds is not forward-thinking, and this kind of kneecapping of projects, which have been spearheaded by the bright and civic-minded folks who have chosen to work here, at best feels unsupportive. As a town, we seriously cannot afford to lose more staff, leaving vast and frightening gaps in corporate knowledge moving forward. Budgeting is always going to be a series of hard choices, but as a citizen who deeply values both our scrappy little Bad News Bears style town internet and the morale of the staff who've worked for our city, I sincerely hope that council will push back around this defunding in an effort to ensure GSET's planned build-out may move forward and in support of town employees. Thank you.
Thank you. John Lund?
Okay, I turned it back on. I'm John Lunt. I am the GM of GSET. I first want to say that I appreciated what Councillor Bullock had to say, that it's fair that if a department...
Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
114 Riddell Street here in Greenfield. I do think that if GSET is being discussed, particularly since a municipal light plant is an independent entity, that it is fair and reasonable to expect that we would be able to speak as well too. Given that, I understand protocols and time constraints. I respectfully disagree with the mayor's characterization of the money and how it's been moved and what is needed and not needed. We have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours answering questions from the mayor, from councilors. We're happy to do it. I do think it is our responsibility. I'm a little baffled as to how there can be this much lack of clarity or the need for more clarity, particularly for things like we have provided actually 2 separate estimates of what all the make-ready costs would be. I will be giving you a letter that I send that I provide backup in so I can show you that we have actually followed through on everything we've said. We do need that money. You cannot separate the North build from the need to pay for the legacy make-ready that was dropped in all of our laps by the previous general manager. If it doesn't get paid, it doesn't matter if you build the North build or not, because if the network can't continue because we are not able to pay, then the whole thing shuts down. So we need every bit of that money put back. It is something that we can easily justify, and I'll be writing to you and explaining why. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Goodwin?
Good evening, counselors. I always thank you for your hard work because I wouldn't want to sit in your chairs and deal with what you deal with. So thank you for serving your city. I was kind of shocked.
Oops, sorry, I need to have you say your name and address.
Pamela, 54 High Street. I'm a little dismayed about what's been going on with the school committee, and I have been following mostly by YouTube, and I was glad to hear an apology came forward because I already was aware of some pretty serious rifts that were going on as far as good communication. I will say that at one of the YouTube meetings, the mayor had asked a financial question, and it was brought up tonight that a budget subcommittee is in operation there. A member of that budget subcommittee at that particular meeting said it was already done, it had already happened, and they just were there, but they didn't have a say about it. That bothers me. I can't tell you how many times I lost track of the chair saying he has to protect the superintendent. That bothers me. I don't know where in the charter it talks about that he referred to. And I feel that the superintendent and the assistant superintendent have a really big, important job to do. And I can't imagine that the chair of the school committee needs to do that protection. So I'll leave it at that. I'm glad that things have turned around, that people have apologized back and forth. I am in favor of the cluster development. I know that we need further housing, so as a member of Housing Greenfield in the past, I'm in agreement with Susan Wargaptik's take. I would ask that when it comes to housing, that people would put their emotions aside, that they would think about whether there's a stigma attached. And that room was filled at the CDC. I mean, standing room only. Everybody showed up. I'm pleased to hear that we have warming centers coming up. I remember a previous time when there was never a plan. We were just going to punt. And I'm grateful that our current mayor has implemented all kinds of plans with different agencies and different ways that we can help people during the very cold weather. I'm also a commissioner at GSET, and I did not receive the communication that you people have received, and we're going to correct that, because as a commissioner, we are supposed to have oversight, and I'm thrilled to just find out that we did get a grant that's going to affect the Weldon. I will be abstaining from that vote because I do live there. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Danielle Letourneau?
Oops. I'm out of practice sitting here. Danielle Letourneau, 40 Garfield Street in the Urban Residential District in a lot of 3,859 square feet for the last 23 years, and I love it. I came here to talk about one topic, but then listening to all of the communications from previous departments, I have a few others. One thing I do want to say is that benches are designed for people to sit on, and that people, no matter what their living circumstances are, deserve dignity, deserve to be able to rest, And so I was very disappointed to see the benches taken away, and I find it insulting and offensive, some of the words that are spoken in the city, not necessarily in this room, but about other people based on what they see them looking like or acting like. Most of the people that are hanging around downtown are people who live in apartments downtown and don't have a big backyard or a living room. So please remember that when you're talking about folks. I'm here to talk about GSET and to talk about the $305,000 clawback that the mayor is trying to do for ARPA funds, which were awarded to GSET in 2021, and which is part of an ongoing plan to expand that service to our neighbors in North Greenfield who desperately want access to what all of us downtown have been able to have for a while, which is amazing, fast, reliable internet service, rivaling those of Fortune 500 companies in our area, and they do it with 7 employees. It gives me pause because I believe that the floating of different numbers and the communications that it's not clear what things will cost is just a way to discourage us and to distract us from the fact that there are many serious changes going on in the finance department of the city of Greenfield. I have serious reservations and concerns about what's been going on with the losing of seasoned professional city staff in the last 9 months. We've lost a finance director, a city accountant, who I never thought would leave the city of Greenfield, a treasurer collector, several clerks, not to mention other staff members like the chief of staff, the deputy DPW director, and that's in 9 months. I have grave concerns about the financial future of Greenfield, and I think the ARPA conversation is just illuminating what other things might be going on. I'm not sure what's going on with the numbers, but I'm not sure anybody else in City Hall does either. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott, I think it's Dunsky? Dunsky, thank you.
Hello, Scott Daneski. I live at 101 Norwood Street. I don't have a prepared statement, so it's just going to come from kind of genuine concerns and thoughts. I came also to speak mainly about GSET because I also have been informed about the same concerns other people have been sharing, that money allotted to or allocated to GSET has been taken away. When I heard the mayor's answer about why today, I got a little bit more concerned because as Councilor Bullock had stated, well, how could the money be taken away before the answers are given, before the budget is put up front, before the financial needs are laid out? The money was already removed per the mayor's sharing. So that was concerning, and it had me thinking more about democratic and representative democracy, that you all are elected officials, and I really appreciate you giving your time. As elected officials who are representing people, there has to be dialogue with those people. There has to be shared communication. It's a dialogue. It's not one person decides kind of thing. And I know the mayor's job is not easy. I don't think I would be able to do that job, but the number of times tonight I heard the mayor say, well, I made that decision, I stand by that decision, it concerned me a little in the context of hearing about how this money was also taken away, and that was the mayor saying, I made this decision without understanding, well, what are the full financial implications of this? So I guess I'm leaning on you all and the mayor to continue the dialogue that needs to exist between each other so that one person isn't making decisions. I worry that what I had heard previously too about the number of people who are leaving their positions in City Hall might also be connected to that same sentiment, that maybe there isn't a dialogue and maybe there's more a hierarchy, which won't work for us. So I just wanted to voice those concerns, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. David Lewis? All right, can you push the button? There you go, you got it.
I'm David Lewis. I live at 54 High Street. I'm against the cluster program that's been brought up by the zoning board. I think it's a very bad idea. The population of Greenfield hasn't changed much since I moved here in 1973. If we look at our schools, we have a lot less students than when I moved here. So obviously, the people in Greenfield are not having that many children. So why do we have to have a cluster type housing or even a change in the zoning law? Who we change it for? People are moving out of town. I'm against nonprofits coming into Greenfield. They don't pay taxes. So they throw the taxes onto the homeowners. I don't like the fact that out-of-town corporations can come in and buy up the property and split it. I like having a little bit of room around me. I don't live in a house. I live in an apartment building, but I can go outside and I've got a little bit of room. So as far as GSET coming into the Weldon, I'm very pleased about that. We've been fighting for that for the last couple of years. And in fact, I think that the local cable thing that we have here, I think goes out in either 28 or 29. I think the city better seriously put it out to bids, not just automatically sign with Comcast. Their service stinks. And so I'll be very glad to be able to have internet that doesn't get dropped. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll move online now. Roxanne Wiedegartner.
I'm here.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good to be with you, counselors. If I look like I'm, I was gonna say, if I see that my video isn't on, but whatever. If I was gonna say, if I look like I'm in bed, I am, because I had a knee replacement done yesterday, so. But I am here speaking as Roxanne Wiedegartner, and a satisfied customer of GSET, and but also from the vantage point of the mayor who allocated the ARPA money to GSET for purchase of make-ready equipment, and of course, to assist in finishing out the north, or even beginning at that point, beginning the north build. While that's one of the important places, and those folks have been asking for their this GSET internet service for many years now, and they deserve it. But also just to ensure that that GSET has the money it needs to expand. And it is definitely, as Mayor DeSorger said, was at the time and still is a legitimate use of ARPA money. As of 12/23, 2023, there was $445,877.70 left of the ARPA money that was allocated to GSET. And it is my understanding that some $306, $5, whatever, is being clawed back. The intent, as I said, was to ensure that this lower cost internet service that's used by the schools, it's used by, available to anyone who wants a lower cost internet option. So I don't know that the mayor really answered the question, what is the purpose of the $300,000 if it's not going to be used or allowed to be used by GSET? So please continue to ask questions about that. I know that you are good at asking questions. That is my way of supporting the continuation of the full ARPA amount that was allocated to GSET. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you, and I was wondering if for the record, if you could state your address, just so we're in compliance with open meeting law.
Of course, Roxanne Wiedegartner, 85 Hastings Street, Greenfield. You are my counselor, John.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to Sandy Kosterman.
Hi there, John. Can you hear me?
Yep. If you could state your name and address, please.
Sandy Kosterman, 141 Barton Road, Greenfield. And I'd just like to weigh in a little bit on the cluster development. I believe we need more public input and discussion about changing or amending our zoning laws. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Yes,
Can you
we
hear me
hear
okay?
you.
Okay, okay, because I heard someone else come on. There are still too many questions regarding these changes and amendments. My husband and I and many other folks we have talked to want the council to delay any decisions regarding zoning changes and amendments until we hear from the people of Greenfield. There are still too many questions, and the answers we were given seem too unclear. Our population has not increased in Greenfield since the 1950s. Why is this being proposed if our population has not grown? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Nathan Hussey? Nathan, are you still out there? I will return to that. Joanna Whitney? Joanna Whitney online.
Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha.
My name's Joanna Whitney. I live at 112 Franklin Street in Greenfield. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to speak a little bit more about the need for accessible housing that a few people have mentioned who've been working on different aspects of housing for Greenfield. They've mentioned that already. This summer, in July, the CDC came out with figures that about 5% of housing, and this is nationwide, but it doesn't get better if you drill down to Massachusetts or Franklin County, that nationwide, about 5% of housing is accessible. About 28% of the population has some form of disability, and 12% have disabilities that involve mobility impairments that affect walking or ability to climb stairs. So even if it were true for Greenfield that 5% of our housing were accessible, if it were also true that 12% of our housing had various kinds of mobility impairment, we would be seeing a significant mismatch in terms of meeting people's housing needs. The conversation about increasing density, well, I think that's an important conversation to have. If you're not having at the same time a conversation about increasing accessible housing, you end up with what we see already in the city center where there's not enough room on housing lots. If somebody needs to add a ramp, there's simply no space to, say you maybe have 3 or 4 steps to get from the driveway level to the entrance into a building. You're talking about a ramp that is, maybe 20 feet long or more, and very few of the housing lots that are in the city center have that kind of space. So if you're going to be talking about increasing density in zoning, you need to be thinking about making sure that accessible entrances or means of access to those buildings has been factored into that density design. As far as the comments that some people have made that there's plenty of housing in Greenfield, I've been looking to try and find an alternate apartment for over 3 years now. And my housing search has, for a while, has been Western Massachusetts. I, would prefer to stay in Greenfield. But I, am looking much more broadly, and I'm beginning to expand to include areas outside of the state. I'm not quite sure how far I'm going to have to go.
That's
to move.
3 minutes if you want to finish up quick.
So I just encourage you, when you're talking about planning conversations around housing in Greenfield, that you remember that that as much as there's a need for housing in general, there's a need for accessible housing. Thank you.
Thank you. David Mascaratolo?
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening.
Welcome.
David Mascaratolo, 43 Country Club Road. I just want to first make the statement that I'm speaking for myself. As most of you know, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Commission, and I was going to come here tonight and talk about my favorite current subject, roosters, but I will put that off for another time. I want to talk about some of the comments that the chair of the school committee has made. I know Glenn, I think he's a great guy. He's doing great work for the city of Greenfield, but some of the comments concern me as a resident. A chair's job is not to protect their head of a department. I would never do that for the police chief or the fire chief as the chair of the Public Safety Commission. I think that's dangerous. I would also never pressure the other commissioners or committee members that they can't go directly to the police chief or the fire chief and ask questions. I mean, that is their job. The reason why we have commissions and councils with multiple people is so we can have lots of different people working together for better goals to better our city. All different nationalities and opinions and education levels. And if I told any of the other 4 public safety commissioners that they could not go to the police or fire department and ask a question, I'm sure I would not be the chair the next time we did our elections. So I would encourage the chair to change that practice. There's no way that it's in any charter that our chair can make statements that other commissioners or other commissioners or superintendents can't go directly to the department that they're overseeing. And I don't think that's good practice. I don't think it's going to increase transparency for the city of Greenfield. And again, I would encourage him to really change that thought process. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your hard work, counselors.
Thank you. We'll go back to Nathan Hussey.
Hi there.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, Nathaniel Hussey, 114 Birch Street. Sorry, I couldn't unmute my mic a few minutes ago. Thank you very much for coming back to me. Thank you for the council for hosting this meeting and everyone who's spoken in regard to the topics at hand. Specifically, I have 3 questions, which I would hope could be answered in one capacity, though I understand this is not the forum for that tonight. First would be, what specific processes were used by the mayor's office to determine the lack of need of GSET for the funds in question? Number 2, was the money removed from the GSET budget or from the GSET account? That was not totally clear. Third, if it was the latter, money from the actual account, what was the legality of such a move? And was legal counsel brought into that question? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll make one last call for public comment if anybody in the room would like to make public comment. Oh,
President Bottomley, we do have one more resident in the chat that maybe got lost right there. 937.
Yes, what, I'm not seeing that one, which,
Stephanie Duclos asked to speak at 9:37. I think it got lost because between David Muscaritolo and then when Nathaniel
no,
Hussey said
that's
that he
fine.
couldn't unmute.
Stephanie, if you're on, if you'd like,
Yes, thank you. Stephanie Duclos, 166 Chapman Street. First and foremost, I love that you guys are asking all the questions. Um, I'm very happy to see that we're actually looking at the stuff that maybe we haven't looked at before. You know, a lot of changes happened when no one was looking. I'm really happy that we're moving the ordinance proposals back to EDC. I think they need further vetting, and sometimes when we change these wording in these ordinances, I really wish that the council would utilize that line item and maybe seek independent, advice from the council, from the council floor. Also, I wanted to state that there was a really great meeting last night, very informative about the status of the Lunt Silversmith, former Lunt Silversmith property at 298 Federal Street, where there was detection of some toxins, and I guess that's going to be addressed at another meeting on what are the strategies. Representative Whips and Senator Comerford were both at that meeting and did show actual concern. So I'm happy to see that the process is moving forward. And I did also see that the mayor was in attendance at that meeting, and I was very pleased to see that as well. I wanted to speak positively about the substation. I think we used to have, my mother was a police officer. She used to work downtown. They walked the beats during some rough times in the 80s too. And benches were removed historically. So I'm not quite sure, a lot of long time citizens that live here in Greenfield know the cycles that we've gone through downtown. The bench removal, we just paid $1 million or thereabouts for that little pocket park that people were complaining that people are laying all over. We'll put some benches up there and put the chess table back there. I think the main concern is, and I actually sit down at the B. I actually spend time with the folks down at the B. We go down to the Veterans Mall where they're now hanging out, and various places where they all hang out. Even I sometimes have a concern walking by that area, and I know most of the people that are there. There are fresh faces I don't recognize, and given some of the uptick in the crime reports that were at the Public Safety Commission meeting, I am concerned, and I'm very pleased that we're addressing it in every, thoughtful manner we can without executing mass arrests for loitering, public drinking, public drug use, prostitution, domestic violence, assault and batteries, a number of the crimes that are happening that most people who don't live in proximity of downtown have no idea how that affects the actual people who live downtown, not to mention the businesses. And speaking of the businesses, I don't know whose decision it was about the roads not getting wet down or a cold patch or whatever, but the dust in the air is unbearable for people who live downtown. It's all over the vehicles. It makes it apparently it's affecting the businesses. I'm pretty sure, and obviously there's been a lot of concern about this GSEP money, but I thought clawbacks were legal. I'm sure that the mayor probably vetted that. But thank you.
3-minute time if you could wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak. I think you guys are doing a great job. I love to hear the debate, and I love that you guys are sending some stuff back to really look at it. Proud of you guys. Thanks.
Thank you. And that wraps up public comment. We'll move to, let's see, there's no public hearings today. Motions and orders will go to mayor's appointments. Councilor Golub.
Just bringing up the sheet. Okay. You all can hear me?
Yep.
Order number fiscal year 25011, the City Council move that it be ordered that the Greenfield City Council pursuant to Charter Section 210 affirms the following reappointments by the mayor. Human Rights Commission, Nate Woodard, Robin Whitcomb, both terms to expire December 31st, 2027. Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, Michael Boudreau, school appointee, term to expire December 31st, 2027. GSET Board of Commissioners, Catherine Markham, term to expire December 31st, 2027. Board of Health, Dr. Darius Greenbacher, filling remainder of term of Dr. John Romano, term to expire June 30th, 2026. Jody Stack, filling remainder of term of Carrie Mimitz, term to expire December 31st, 2025. Majority vote required.
I need a second on that.
Second.
Update from committee.
This received a positive unanimous vote.
And before I open this up to discussion, we did receive an email, I believe that was Monday, about one of the appointments. And I just wanted to confirm that I had reached out to the mayor's office, who had reached out to legal and has not gotten an answer back on that. So I will open this up for discussion. Councilor Garrett.
So as far as that question about that appointment being reached out to legal, if we vote on that and we don't know, this is about the length of the term, right? Is it just going to be whatever the decision, are we legally allowed to vote on something we're not sure how long the term is, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know. The problem with this coming up at the last minute is really problematic. This information could have been provided sooner. I don't think this was something that needed to come up 2 days before the full city council meeting. We had an entire meeting devoted at A&O to appointments. That said, we have no we have no answer to it, so we can either vote it in or we could table it, in which the time expires and the person gets appointed. It may not be a big deal because I believe the person wanting to serve is the most important thing here. I believe a term could be amended. If there was a legal issue, I bet the mayor could just give us another order that we could sign with an amended end date. But essentially, we won't have an answer, which is why I know I've received some criticism about not letting people speak. I didn't want to hear from the mayor either on this because we have no answer. That was my reason. This council is not for two people to go at each other in front of us. We set up meetings, it's announced to the public, so the public knows what's going on, and we have information. So I don't base it on he said, she said. We have information that we can base our questions on. So I just wanted to be clear about where I was on this issue. We have no answer because of the last minute nature of where we are. So I don't know, I'm interested to hear what way the council wants to go on these. It may not make a big difference. I had Councilor Minhas and then Mastro.
I personally would just like to go ahead and vote on this. Additionally, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's put their name forward. There's a few that I'm familiar with. Nate is a young gentleman, a part of the community, and he's a person of color, and he's done a lot of work in his own age group, and I'm glad that he's put his name up, and I'm glad that the mayor approved that. So I'll be happy to vote for these names tonight.
Mastro, Totaro.
Yeah, this is the debate whether or not this is a 3 or 5 year term. Is that correct, John? Mr. President? Right?
Sorry, I wasn't.
This is about whether it's a 3 or 5 year term.
Yes, for specifically for the GSET appointment.
Right. Well, Pamela Goodwin was appointed under a 3 year term. So I don't know what the issue is. I mean, a precedent has been set as far as I'm concerned. So there you have it. I mean, if somebody else has any input on this, on the council, it wasn't an issue 6 months ago. Now it is, so I don't get it.
Counselor Bullock?
I'm happy to vote on this as is. We have amended timeframes and terms in the past, so I'm not concerned.
Counselor Gilmore?
Yeah, I was gonna actually suggest that we just separate this one out and then maybe make a separate motion to table it, but it doesn't sound like folks are really concerned. I think maybe what we need to dig into, and you know, this isn't our business, so this is me sort of like speaking to the mayor and saying that maybe, you know, we need to figure out what these terms are supposed to be, and then if there needs to be a correction, Councilor Masters-Totaro just mentioned that Pamela Goodwin was recently appointed. If we need to revisit that and extend her appointment by 2 years to make sure that we're maintaining those staggered terms, and, you know, heaven help her, like, if she actually wants to do that for 2 more years, because that sounds like not her favorite occupation. But I feel like that's something that we can take care of, knowing that we are satisfying sort of like the intent here, and then, you know, make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's in the future. But for tonight, I mean, we just have to do the best that we can. This is an important role, and, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about this tonight, so I really want to make sure that there's somebody there.
I tend to agree with you, Counselor Gilmore. Vice President Gilmore, I believe this is really in the mayor's hands. It's the mayor's appointment, and whatever issues can come back to us to correct if needed. Counselor Toronzo.
I was going to echo kind of the same rhetoric. If we table it, it goes through anyway, as is written, as a 3-year term. So it's really gonna, I think this is just something that has to be cleared up on the back end. And if it has to be rewritten as an appointment, if Pamela's has to be modified as we were just discussed, I think that can, I don't really see how that's a problem. I don't think we're doing anything outside the bounds of what we're allowed, because if we separate this out and table it, like I said, the appointment still goes through. Our role here is really just to, if there's a reason to reject an appointment, other than that, we're just kind of, that's kind of I feel like our oversight when it comes to these appointments.
Do we have any more discussion on this? Looks like we're ready for a roll call vote.
Counselor Golub?
Yes.
Counselor Gordon?
Yes.
Counselor Masters-Totaro?
Yes.
Counselor Bullock?
Yes.
Vice President Gilmore?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Wondolowski?
Yes.
Counselor Garrett?
Yes.
Counselor Minhas?
Yes.
Counselor Toronzo?
Yep.
Does the president wish to vote?
Yes and yes.
The motion carries.
We'll move on to approval of the MOU. This is Counselor Toronzo.
This is order number FY25-012. The City Council, upon recommendation of Mayor DeSorger, move that it be ordered that the memorandum of understanding between the Greenfield Police Department, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, and Mass Cop Local 470 be approved. This majority vote required. This came as a positive unanimous recommendation.
Sorry, we need a second on that.
No, sorry.
Second.
This came through as a positive unanimous recommendation.
Open this up for discussion. Any questions? Do you want to give us any background, or are we good? The council good? Great. Roll call vote.
Counselor Golub?
Yes.
Counselor Gordon?
Yes.
Counselor Masters-Totaro?
Yes.
Counselor Bullock?
Yes.
Vice President Gilmore?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor Wondolowski?
Yes.
Counselor Garrett?
Yes.
Counselor Minhas?
Yes.
Counselor Toronzo?
Yep.
Does the president wish to vote?
Yes and yes.
The motion passes.
We move on to presentation solicitation of petitions and similar papers, of which there are none. Report from committees. Councilor Bullock, would you like to say a few words just on?
Yeah, we discussed, cluster development was the only topic that was up for a vote in economic development. We did have a very robust public comment section about two other topics, the ADU issue and camper, allowing an ordinance that would allow living in campers, which we're not up for vote. They were just on the discussions. We had like over an hour of public comment. So the vote that we took was 2 in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention. This will go back to EDC for further discussion. So I do urge the public to, write or come to the committee meeting if you have feelings on this, because I really don't want folks to feel like this moved faster than people knew. So that meeting is October 8th, I believe. The only things for counselors to know regarding that is I would just, there's a couple pieces here. We had this presentation. The cluster development is a better drafting of something that already exists. We're not creating we're not writing a bylaw, we're amending a bylaw. So I would just urge everybody before the next council meeting to really read it's like 5 pages or 7 pages, just like, please really read it and read only the parts that are being added, because this is zoning law that already exists. And there's subdivision law as well. And the frontage, the acreage, like all of that stays the same. Your neighbor could do this with a special permit already. So yeah, I just really, really ask that folks do diligence and read before we get to debate, because I think it's gonna continue to be a topic that have a lot of questions about, as it should. So that will be on our EDC agenda, along with the ADU, which we are most likely we will have a discussion because it's been brought forward, but we're most likely gonna hold that as well.
Excellent, thank you for that update. We'll move there's no unfinished business, no old business, new business. On page 39, we just have a list of the executive sessions that we released and the ones we withheld. It's just an announcement to comply with MGL, Mass General Law, and it will be posted soon on the website. I have a note from Kathy, maybe next week it will be posted. Also under new business, I did want to mention, we don't have any GSET commissioners here. They were here tonight. Under new business, I've advised the clerk to put GSET for a meeting topic to go to committee chairs, which I believe is appropriate, and they're not here, but I can only say, I hear you, I hear the frustration, but we just can't have a free-for-all. We have to have information so that we can ask appropriate questions, and that's why we plan and schedule meetings, and then the public is very concerned about GSET, and then they know it's happening, and we can have a productive meeting and hopefully have lots of people here, and that is the only reason. So I am listening, and I want to have transparency, and I want to hear from department heads, and I don't want any department head feeling like they can't have a voice or speak at city council. It's just the council has dealt with issues with our 5-day rule, getting information in, getting questions in, and there really is a reason for that process, so that we do get the information we need and it's announced to the public. There's no motions for reconsideration, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Get a second. And that will have to be a roll call vote.
Counselor Golub,
Yes.
Counselor Gordon,
Yes.
Counselor Master Tataro,
Yep.
Counselor Bullock,
Yes.
Vice President Gilmore,
Yes, please.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Wondolowski,
Absolutely.
Counselor Garrett,
Yep.
Counselor Minhas.
Yes.
Counselor Toronzo.
Yeah.
Does the president wish to vote?
Yes, and yes. Meeting is adjourned at 10:06 PM.